future of Geb. It has mostly been in Antarctica so far, and we are about to move it to Los Angeles. So, and we had multiple Los Angelinos on the line, throwing out all sorts of Easter eggs and inside jokes and iconic places, and it's going to be fun. Maybe I need to move to LA for a while. Not. Actually, if the opportunity was there, I might do it. So, what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to play a little music. I'm going to get my... I'm going to get everything set up to draw, get some coffee. Sorry, I hadn't... we were on this call right up until the last minute. In fact, that call is still going on. I just had to drop off. So, let's go to YouTube Studio. And there is nobody scheduled to call in today. So if anybody wants to, I will send you a Zoom link info. Audio library. So we've been listening to Patrick Patricios a lot recently. Let's start with Guitar House, Dance and Electronic Inspirational by Josh Pan. Chat window. Where's the chat? Everybody who is zero bodies. Let's see, what else? Okay, we'll start in fresco as always. Oh, has it crashed? It crashed. Awesome. Awesome, Adobe. That's awesome. Launch it again. I'll wait till it's fully loaded on the other screen and then pop it over here to the Cintiq. All right. Zoom call. Start the Zoom call. $2:04. If I'm actually drawing by 2:08, I think we'll be on track. So, Zoom. Let's see. Zoom recently. Nope, not that one. Okay, who else was on here recently? How about Ed? How about Dermot? There we go. Open Zoom meetings. Okay, join with video. Join with computer audio. Oh, who's this? Danny. Danny. Can you hear me? Hey, Danny, can you hear me? Danny doesn't seem to be able to hear me very well. Your internet connection is unstable. Huh? Danny, can you see me or hear me? Weird. Huh. What's going on? Let's see. Compose. Danny. Diskin. Let's see, maybe we can try the chat here in Zoom. Chat. You can see me but not hear me? Actually.
Yeah, okay, now I can hear you.
Okay, great. There we go.
Okay.
So, you're mostly not going to be on screen. I'm going to drag our Zoom meeting over to the screen that's not on the live stream.
Mm-hmm. Good idea. I don't look very good.
Why do you say that? You look fit? You look healthy?
Oh, I'm ill. I'm grotty. I'm ill and nasty. So, I mean, I'm not particularly more ugly than normal or more handsome, but no, just grotty.
So what are you struggling with in terms of an illness?
Oh, I don't know. Nothing very fashionable, I'm afraid. I don't think it's COVID. I think it's kind of it's headache, kidney pain, a bit of a cold. I'm not sure, but a bunch of us have it. I met up with some people the other day, and everyone's got it.
Well, this is a good time to not have the fashionable illness. Good to be unfashionable right now.
Yeah, yeah, how you doing, Camo?
Well, I just got off a different call. It was a multi-person meeting strategizing about the future of this comic that I work on. And that went right up to 2 o'clock, so I'm playing catch-up right now, just trying to get everything open and set up. Now, do you have the... Whoops, stop. Do you have the live stream up? Can you see the chat?
I can see you, and I can see the chat, yeah.
That's the Zoom chat I think you're seeing.
Okay.
We're doing a YouTube live stream here, so let me send you that link.
No, you sent it to me already. No, you haven't. No. That's the Zoom meeting. No, you haven't.
Okay.
You haven't sent.
Okay, so I'll post the link into the Zoom chat here. When this page opens, you'll want to mute the YouTube page. Otherwise, you'll hear me twice, and there's quite a lag between what we say and what, when it appears on YouTube. Let's see.
Okay.
So there's the link.
out of my head.
Yeah, that's my channel. So right now you should.
Right, I can see it, and I am muted as well. I'm muted.
Okay. Now, looks like we have all of one viewer, and I think that's you. So
That's me, is it? Okay.
nobody's here yet. But some folks might show up in the chat.
Okay.
Ignore me if I pick my nose or something. I don't have the Zoom window visible, so it's easy for me to forget that I'm on camera. Let's see. Come on. Oh. So I usually start off just doodling, nothing special, nothing deliberate. I do have some assigned work that I'll have to get onto a little bit later in the stream. But what were you and I going to talk about? It's been a while now since we made this arrangement.
Yeah. I think I reached out because I was pimping some psychedelic art for my charity, or rather my community interest company.
Well, let's see. Where is this? Is this art displayed on a website somewhere?
Yeah. Let me find it for you.
Yeah, if you would just post a link to it in the Zoom chat. And I'll post it to the YouTube chat. And then we'll have a look at it.
So we've got 7 artists there. I can tell you a little bit about RAIN, which is the community interest company. And we can talk about whatever, really.
Say more about what a community interest company is.
It's a non-profit. It's a type of non-profit. The structure of it is that 70% of, and I think it's 65% of the profits have to go back into whatever you're doing. So in our case, we're doing agroforestry and reforestation, community-led projects in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a charity. It doesn't have the same kind of tight strictures that a charity has, but we're in the process of becoming a charity as well.
Wow, that's some nice stuff. So this first person up here in the upper left, Anderson DiBernardi. This has a very Pablo Amaringo look to it. Was he a student of Pablo's?
Yeah, he was. So Pablo was discovered by Luis Eduardo Luna,
mm-hmm.
and one of his top students was Anderson DiBernardi. Yeah, it does. It's got the kind of vibe of Pablo, hasn't it?
Yeah.
We're also actually helping Luna sell original Pablo Amaringos. So if any of your listeners have $35,000 upwards for a painting, then get in touch with me and I'll help you out.
Right on.
That's quite a cool project. That's for a botanical garden that he has in Florianopolis. So the ethnobotanical garden. They're also trying to remove an invasive species from a hillside.
Mm-hmm. Is this near his retreat center, Wazawaski?
Yeah, it is. So I think they're not doing retreats at the moment. In fact, I'm sure they're not doing retreats at the moment.
Right.
So they're focusing on the botanical garden. Yeah. They're pretty on there. If you click on them, you can go through to the various paintings as well. This guy John Ching's cool as well.
All right, let's back up and check that out. Oh, yeah, need to mute that YouTube. Where's that mine that's unmuted? Let's see. Let's just close some stuff. All right.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent, there it all is. So
Closing tabs, you can tell I don't do very often. Who did you say we should look at next? John Ching?
Well, they were pretty good. Yeah, John Ching's cool. John Ching's got really nice style to him. He's on the same on that same page.
All right.
Yeah, they're very cool.
The jaguar with the butterfly mask. I like that. Oh, it's like a butterfly orchid mask.
Yeah. And all sorts, and they're not all Amazonian or Latin American. We've got an Indonesian guy, Sweeney Penn, who's got some drawings there, and I think that's Sane Visser, who makes stuff out of human hair. And that's the one with the kind of the hair.
She's a material explorer, maker, and researcher.
Yeah.
Material Futures at Central St. Martin's. Or Martins. What do we got here? Oh, wow. So this guy's got like a net bag woven out of his hair? Is that his hair attached to his head, or is that...
I don't think that is his hair.
Oh, okay.
No. But it is most certainly hair.
All
And, yeah, it's pretty cool. I don't know if I'd be doing my shopping in it.
Might disturb some folks. Let's see.
I met a guy once who'd cut off all his hair. He had loads of hair, and then made a hat out of his own hair in the shape of a Chinese pagoda. It was a massive hat. In fact, I wore the hat because I was cold, and yeah, very impressive.
All right.
So that's her.
Yeah, that's her stuff. This is Carolina or Carolina?
Carolina. She's Italian. So she was the one who organised the gallery, and yeah, she's got some crazy stuff. She's got a really lovely one of a couple kind of made out of a tree embracing. The last line in the mid on the right. She's just got some really cool pictures. They're quite bright.
Yeah.
And there's a tarot one there with the dog, the fool's dog in the foreground. I don't know if you can see that one. I rather like as well.
Well, I'll keep an eye out for it. I'm several seconds ahead of what you're seeing. Possibly up to a minute and a half, depending on your internet connection. Wow.
That's a pretty one. The dog.
Oh, yep, here's the one with the fool and the dog. Fool ready to just blithely step off the cliff. The
Yeah,
dog is looking sort of forlorn, very serious. The antithesis of the fool. Oh, there's the couple us in the tree. Yeah.
I've just caught up with you on the fool now, so I'm pretty far behind. Yeah, so we're doing these. We're selling these to raise cash for community-led projects in various parts of Brazil. We're working with indigenous nations, both in the Amazon and in the south of Brazil, putting together a project with the Kangang, which is quite an interesting nation. They've been planting a araucaria tree, the Paraná pine, for it looks like about 1,000 years on purpose, and they have an intimate relationship with this tree. Like they use it for baptisms, for example. They also demarcate their territories, and they map out the roads or the trails between different communities as well with this tree. But they've also been it's a pine, so it produces lots of pine nuts. And the pine nuts attract animals, so traditionally it's been used for increasing their game, hunting. And that makes it really good for regeneration, which is what we do. That's the R of RAIN. RAIN's the name of the organisation, so it's Regenerative Agroforestry Impact Network. And so it's really good for regeneration because it both attracts and supports biodiversity, and particularly birds. When they come in, they eat seeds and then they crap out others. They crap out seeds basically, and lead to new growth. So it's a keystone regenerative species. But this tribe has been selecting, or different family groups of this tribe has been selecting strains of this tree over the last probably 1,000 years to give fruit at different times of the year. So they now have 6 months of the year. It fruits for about a month, but there's I think it's six different strains which fruit over 6 months of the year, which means they're attracting game for 6 months of the year as well.
What's the name of this people again?
They're called the Kaingang, which I will write in the chat box. And they're in trouble really. They're in the south of the country, and there's two communities that I know of anyway, and one of them is in, I believe it's the last remaining Araucaria forest in the world. And this tree has been around since the dinosaurs. So it's supported the dinosaur. It looks like the way that the dinosaurs' faces, or some of the dinosaurs' faces developed in order to eat this tree. That's why they think it was around.
Oh wow! What's the name of the tree again?
Shrunk. The tree is called the Paraná pine. Paraná pine, and then its scientific name is Araucaria angustifolia.
So Paraná, is that Palana?
No, Parana. It's also called the candelabra tree. That's one of its names. So this tree was, it suffered a lot. In the 20th century, 100 million of these were felled and sent to Europe to rebuild Europe after the wars. And the result is that this forest has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and this tribe is in the last remaining Paraná pine forest. But the guy I know, who's called Cretan Kaingang, he basically occupied a chunk of land, a chunk of degraded land, to settle another part, and started planting this pine. Is in his mind, and he sees it as a kind of territorial marker. So it's his stand against the soya industry, which is, in that part of the country, it's absolutely devastated for cattle farming and for soya farming as well. So that project there is to build two sapling nurseries, producing 36,000 trees each per year, with a view to replacing. Yeah, that's the one. Paraná pine, that's right.
Yeah, it looks like it's right out of Jurassic Park or something. I can just see a big sauropod reaching up there, stripping needles off of those bunches. I can see why it's called the candelabra tree. It's pretty clear.
Yeah, it's a relative of the monkey puzzle, which they have in Mexico. I don't know if you've got it. I don't know if you've got it in the States. Whereabouts are you in the country?
I'm in Vermont.
Okay, that's miles away.
Yeah, very far away. It's basically Canada. I'm in New England here.
That's a big country you got there. Yeah, so it's related to the monkey puzzle tree, which is my favourite tree. In fact, it's the first tree I learned the name of, because at my primary school there was the monkey puzzle tree.
We have a few different states here in the U.S. that if the state itself were a country, it would be a pretty big and powerful country. Thinking California and Texas mostly.
Yeah, are they going to cede, or what do you think? Do you think it's going to be an independent state?
Not in my lifetime, no.
No,
I don't think so.
I've heard all kinds of crazy coming out of the States over the last year.
Well, there's a lot of pining for disaster that goes on here. A lot of people who think that if things aren't run my way, if the people who I hate get into power, then that's all going to go to hell, and we'll be, eating squirrels this time next year, and that's a fantasy.
Do you think that's something? I mean, bearing in mind that the US was founded by apocalyptic Puritans, do you think that's kind of, pining for disaster is built into the DNA of the country, or do you think that's a new thing?
I've read about the history of apocalyptic cults here in the U.S., and there's always been a subculture of people who are fascinated with and pining for the end. There's a denomination here, a Christian denomination called Seventh-day Adventists. You familiar with them? So they used to be called the Millerites, and they followed this guy named Miller who had this date for the end of the world. And his followers, as the date approached, they gave away their possessions, and they gathered together to sing in, the coming of the kingdom of heaven, and it didn't show up. And did they disband? No, of course not. Miller just went back, and did some more calculations and said, oh, no. Here's the real date. And of course, that date came and went, and nothing happened. And again, you'd think that with two demonstrated failures of this guy's power to prophesy the end, they would give up. But nope, they didn't. They are still around. They are still a denomination. So there's always been this undercurrent of people who, they despise the current order, so they have this wish fulfillment fantasy that it's going to fall any minute now. And, here we are 250 years later, and it still hasn't collapsed. Maybe this year, though. Maybe 2021. Maybe that's the year. So
yeah, recalibrate,
Exactly.
carry the one. Forgot to square the value.
Right.
But Jehovah's Witnesses, I think they stopped in the 1970s announcing particular dates for the end. That was after 6 failures.
Right. It's like, it's coming. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about the specifics. It's coming.
I know where they're coming from, man. It's boring. Like continuing staying alive and having to deal with anything which isn't, the end.
Right.
It can get draining after a while. There's
Either
only so
the
much
end
on
or
Netflix.
total victory. Like, I was really interested in the candidacy of Andrew Yang, and I was making videos about it where I was praising the guy and saying everything that I liked about him. And I said, there's no way he's going to win this time around, but, he's really establishing himself as a credible figure for future elections. And his dyed-in-the-wool fans just jumped on me and called me a crypto Bernie bro and a fake Yang fan. It's like, no, if he doesn't win this time around, it's all over, man. This is our only chance. It's like, no, life, you'll discover, that life has this annoying habit of just continuing year after year into the future. And it doesn't collapse, and it doesn't explode, and it doesn't, fall into a black hole, or, the skies don't open up, and... it's just more going to work and paying taxes and fighting with your spouse, and it just goes on and on.
I saw him on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he didn't sound to me like he thought he was going to win himself. Like that was the kind of message I was getting from him, as he was trying to push the argument in a certain direction.
That conversation between Andrew Yang and Joe Rogan, I think, is like one of the pivotal 3-hour periods of this whole past election cycle. Because, while he didn't win a single state primary, but, everybody knows what UBI stands for now. And a year ago, that wasn't the case.
Are you not worried about UBI?
I'm not worried. I don't think it's going to be implemented anytime soon.
Quite a big push here in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I think more because of COVID, because of anything else. But I think he was very eloquent. Actually, that guy, very good.
Very good.
I don't know what it's like in your country, but would they vote for a? I don't mean to sound rude. Would they vote for an Oriental in the US? Is that a feasible thing?
As far as I know, he had a lot of popularity among Trump voters.
Cool.
He's the sort of figure who could bring in dissidents from both sides. The largest block of voters here in the U.S. are the non-voters. It's the 100 million people who have given up and say, this is bullshit. I'm not even going to dignify this charade with my participation. And Andrew Yang, can speak to people like that.
Right, I think.
So it looks like now he's going to run for mayor of New York City.
Oh, wow.
Which is, it's a huge job. It is a very difficult job. There are entrenched interests there who must be pleased, but there's also all kinds of systemic problems which have just been festering, administration after administration. And the guy who's there now, de Blasio, he was elected while I was living there. He is simply not up to the task. He's not even close. He's, the thing is sort of running on autopilot on his watch. So, yeah. And mayor of New York City, man, I know that Bloomberg didn't do very well in his attempt to buy his way into the nomination, but that is some serious, CV padding there.
Where's that, Cuomo?
Cuomo was quite a while ago. Right now, the mayor of New York City is Bill de Blasio, and before him was Michael Bloomberg. And Michael Bloomberg tried to run for president this year. What's that?
Do you miss New York?
I do. Not now. I wouldn't want to be there right now, but in general, yes. Yeah, right now it would be very frustrating because, right now, I'd be locked up in a tiny little apartment somewhere, unable to go outside, and the value of being in New York is not your tiny little apartment. It's all the things that are awaiting you when you step outside that apartment. So now would be a really shitty time to be there.
Yeah, we got out of London not very long before the pandemic started. It was a funny one, actually. My wife got it into her head one day with the aid of some plants that we really need to leave London in a hurry. And I agreed with her, and so we did. And we went looking for a place, and we found a place that was my friend's mother had just passed away, and he said, "Why didn't you go and live in mine?" And we had it all sorted out. It was a really nice place. It was in Hastings, and it was beautiful. And then what happened was he got mugged, and as he was running away from the mugger, he fell over and he knocked himself. He got a concussion. Basically, and then he started forgetting all kinds of things. And he was building the website for the initial iteration of Rain, my community interest company. Mm-hmm. And he started forgetting all kinds of things. And because he'd already said he was going to rent us this place, I kind of forgot about it. And eventually I said, "Hey man, what about that house?" And he was like, "Oh shit, yeah, no, sorry, I sold it." At which point we'd already taken the kids out of school. We put our stuff in boxes. We'd all done. So we were like, where should we go? I knew 2 people in Hastings. But anyway, we ended up coming down to Hastings, moving into this place. I hadn't even seen it when we moved in. But really pleased to have got out of London.
Yeah, now would be a rough time to be there. Also very memorable. I mean, you'd be talking about it 20 years from now.
You might still be, hugging your knees in a padded cell 20 years from now. Is it boring to talk about coronavirus? Have you done enough of that?
I'm interested in people's perspectives. I don't have a whole lot to say about it myself. I'm deliberately eschewing all conspiracy theories. They're just too easy to spin around this one. But if you have a really juicy one, I'd be happy to hear it.
Well, I'm quite interested in the fact that it's oncolytic, as in there's a case of a guy who got coronavirus when he had all kinds of tumors all over his body, and the tumors started to shrink. Really? Which is not uncommon with viruses. It happens occasionally with viruses that viruses are, they have anti-cancer activities, and I think that's very interesting. And I think that the fact I get the feeling. Oh, you've stopped speaking now. You've gone on mute.
Well, have I?
Only for a minute. No, I can hear you again now.
Okay. Is this the word? Oncolytic?
Oncolytic, yeah.
Is that how it's spelled?
ONCOLYTIC. I can find your paper if you want. I've got a paper somewhere.
Let's see.
Let me look it up. But I think that's quite interesting, because if you think about what cancer is, it's some part of your body working too hard.
Right.
And it seems that I think coronavirus it seems to hit people who work too hardest. Like New York City, for example, that's got the highest work hours in the US. I believe it, maybe even in the world, but anyway, certainly in the US. And I think when I had it, I just went to sleep for a long time, and I wonder if it's got a kind of viruses are intelligence they're information by definition. They're information, and some of them have provided incredible boons to humanity as well. I think it's a download, basically. I think it's
well, do you see what I have on screen now? I've got the Journal of Virology, American Society for Microbiology, Journal of Virology, and their article here is coronavirus genetically redirected to the epidermal growth factor receptor exhibits effective anti-tumor activity against malignant glioblastoma.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. And then again, if you think about it if you were the biome, right? And I know you're not apocalyptic, but obviously I am a little bit more apocalyptic than you. If you were the biome,
I can be for the next 2 hours.
If you wanted human beings to stop working so hard, stop producing loads of stuff, and stop selling loads of stuff, and stop buying loads of stuff, what would you do to wipe out economies without hurting too many people? And I think it seems to be pretty interesting. Yeah, so I've got 2. I'll pass on a couple of papers here. I'll put them in the Zoom chat.
All right, I will transfer them to the YouTube chat.
That's one, and That's another one. That might be the one. That might be one that you found already, but that's two there. For example, like the young. This isn't obviously. This is a rather sweeping statement, but the young people I know who've got affected badly, and there's not very many of them, are people who are really, really tired. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy who died. When you hear stuff in the news about someone in their 30s dying, one of the first ones in England was a nightclub promoter. So there's a guy who's probably not doing very much sleeping at the right time.
Right. Probably a lot of drinking, probably a lot of cigarette smoke in his life, even if it's secondhand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in contact with a lot of people.
Yeah, so that's kind of my feeling about it, is maybe... Like give an example of how viruses have influenced human evolution anyway, or pre-human evolution. There's a particular... shrew. I'm going to turn off my WhatsApp now that I've got that, because it's going to be pinging away.
Okay.
When the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs hit the planet, there weren't any mammals at that point, but there was a warm-blooded creature, and it was a shrew. And there may be more actually, but there was one particular warm-blooded little shrew thing, and it survived the blast. And it got infected at some point later with a particular virus. And the virus produced a protein which allowed particles to stick onto membranes in the body, right? And this was part of its function, was to stick onto membranes, so the virus would, also the viral casing would stay there stuck into the body. And so this little shrew gets infected either in the eggs or in the balls of this shrew. And this, I don't know if you know, but like a viral or retrovirus anyway, it splices itself into the DNA of a creature, and if it gets into the nuts or the eggs of a creature, then it passes into the bloodline, and it passes forward into that species. So some generations later, the creature, through evolution or whatever you believe, the creature managed to start to use that particular type of protein to so the protein that viral DNA produced, in order to stick the egg coming out the fallopian tube onto the cervix, I believe. And so this is the beginning of the placenta. Now, the placenta is a very strange cell. It has a very strange organ. It doesn't have, like most cells have a nucleus and a cell wall, but a placenta is different. It has, it's a whole load of nucleuses in a big kind of amorphous blob, and it sticks onto the side of the tube. It sticks onto the side of the cervix, and lo and behold, the mammalian line, right, comes out of this viral DNA. And there's another one as well. There's another chunk of viral DNA which is specifically found in humans and not other apes. So we've got two pretty incredible examples of how viral DNA makes up 9% of our DNA code. And quite a lot of the things that we can do, or rather that life can do, they're unthinkably complex. Like the Calvin cycle is a good example of all the various substrates, the process by which a plant does photosynthesis, right? So it's a whole series of particular reactions, molecular reactions, and each one of those on its own wouldn't actually be very useful to a plant. Right, so the question arises: I can't remember how many steps the Calvin cycle has, but how do you evolve a massively complex cycle if each of the steps aren't particularly useful on their own? And the answer to that question is, or an answer to that question is, if each of those were evolved by a virus to do some small thing, and they all got mixed into a genome and became the building blocks for our own DNA or for our own protein complexes, then you can get all kinds of much more complex evolutionary leaps, let's say. So I find that quite interesting. You've got cases with there's a particular type of plant, for example, which it gets infected by a wasp. It gets wasps lay its eggs in this plant, and it can only defend itself against this parasite if it's got some viral DNA in it. So I think it deserves a bit of thought. By nature, it's information, it's code, and it produces something.
All right. So there's a saying that says the purpose of a system is what it does, and
And
I think of that right now just in terms of the government's response to COVID. They might be claiming that their purpose is to help people, but in terms of the effects of the measures taken here in the U.S., the people who have been helped the most are people like Jeff Bezos. Very, very wealthy people have become considerably more wealthy over the past year, and everybody else got $1,200. They got one check, one time.
do you think he wants to buy a Pablo Amaringo original?
I think you might want to buy Brazil.
When I lived in the Amazon, I tried to order a book on Amazon, and Amazon doesn't deliver to the Amazon.
Yeah. They did when I was there, but so many of them got lost, that just never arrived where they were supposed to go. That I think they may have given up.
Yeah, Brazil's dodgy, man. Brazil is like that's one of the really difficult things about working in Brazil is you can't, like most cash transfers, for example, you can transfer money pretty much everywhere, but like transfer-wise won't transfer to Brazil, and it's by far the hardest country to transfer money to. It's just so I don't know if it's because it's so corrupt. Well, you've got a Parker's just arrived.
Oh, thank you for saying that because I have not been looking at the chat. Okay. Hey, Parker and guest. So the guest today is the Reverend Danny Nemu, and we're talking about psychedelic art, and he and his organization are selling some psychedelic art to raise money for good purposes. So I think, no, the link is not here, is it? So let me find that again.
It's up at the top of the...
Is it the one, www.mattiol? Is that the one?
No. I'll put it in again. There you go, Rain Umbrella.
Right. So now I need to find the Zoom chat. Let's see. Here we are. Right. All right. So Parker here. Go to this page and check that stuff out. But now we're talking about viruses and weird evolutionary synergies that they can facilitate.
I've always got a lot out of disease. I've had. I'm just noticing today when I'm ill at the moment, and when I get ill, I want to tell people I love them. And I watched a fairly rubbish film today. It wasn't that bad. It was Kardec. And it really moved me quite profoundly. I get much more emotional when I'm ill, which is quite interesting in itself. And I've always, had some of the fevers I've had. I've had some amazing revelations and visions on fevers as well. And of course, I was ill. I was ill for 8 months in the Brazilian Amazon, and that changed my life. It was really instructive in many ways. And I think it made me a completely different person. Gave me a lot. I think illnesses can bring quite a lot. In Chinese medicine, they say, or some people say, you should get 2 colds a year at the changing of the seasons.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so to get rid of stuff. Yeah, we've got a kind of idea because we see the world as a machine, and it's not. It's if anything, it's alive, or it's just very complex, or whatever it might be. But so when something goes wrong, when we get ill, we think, oh, it's broken, I've got to fix it. But I don't think illness is necessarily things going wrong. I think it's something changing. No, it definitely can't.
What's the movie that you said you watched?
Kardec.
Kardec. How do you spell that?
Yeah, it's a Portuguese film. Kardec. It's not bad. It's kind of history of Allan Kardec, the spiritist, the guy who wrote the Book of Mediums and the Book of Spirits. And in the way of most Brazilian films, it's quite corny.
Oh, is it
serious?
Looks like a Netflix original.
It watches like Netflix original.
Well, no, I mean, I searched for it and I have found it on Netflix, and it's got the logo, Netflix film.
Huh. It's all right. If you're interested in the history of Spiritism, then watch it by all means. But it's not. I guess my point is, it's not that much. It's not a particularly good film. but I was weeping all the way through it. I was weeping quite a lot in it, and I'm sure that's because I'm ill,
right,
and not anything else. So I find that quite interesting. I mean, and they say like a lot of cancer patients, the majority, I believe, people who survive cancer, talk about the growth that they've done during their cancer ordeals. They call it post-traumatic growth syndrome. I think that's what it's called. And you get it with people who've been in the tsunami and stuff like that. But people come out of life-threatening situations with new faculties, new depths of understanding.
So Parker's comment here is, I wonder what will happen if humans conquer disease. You make me think about if that will be only a gain. I guess things will be lost too. So yeah, if medical science advances to the point where people just don't get sick anymore, that could be a net loss for us.
I don't think we can. I think what happens is the diseases shift around. We got an epidemic of obesity and depression and drug abuse, and I think fundamentally, this is just like my crazy theory of cosmology, but I think that the world runs on meaning. I think that's the hardware, or that's the software, that's the operating system of the universe, is meaning. And if we don't, there's, I mean, as horrible as disease is, it certainly does give meaning. If you've had a child getting ill, really ill, and then getting better. My kid was in hospital for three days, and it suddenly other problems fade into the background.
Right.
And it gives a whole massive injection of meaning into your life. And if you don't have an injection of meaning into your life, where do you find meaning? And it might be on Instagram, for example, or it might be in, I don't know, talking total shit on the internet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Instagram is my social media focus these days, and largely because I'm not talking about politics or anything like that. I'm just drawing and posting images, and the people that I'm following are artists. And so
it's a youngsters' game, isn't it, Camo?
I think so. Yeah, there's a lot of like 22-year-olds who are so much better than me. They're better than I ever will be. It's a little bit dispiriting. But they came up with the internet, and the internet shows you what's possible. Whereas for me, my art style was informed by comics printed, in this cheap 4-color process on pulpy paper. I have expectations about what is possible for me to create visually that were formed in the 1980s. And I think that people now who they go on Instagram and they look at all the stuff that people not much older than is creating, they think, oh yeah, that's totally possible. I can do that. So
what is the future of your artwork? You said you had a very long meeting about it. What have you decided?
Oh well, it's nothing to do with what I'm doing here. This is I'm just playing here. But we have a comic strip. It's a web comic. It's about aliens living in Antarctica, and one of them has just gone AWOL, and she's flown the coop and gone to Los Angeles, where she's going to participate in a fictionalized version of this LA event called Lucha Vavoom, which is Mexican wrestling, burlesque, comedy, and roller derby, all rolled into one. And it's just this very wild and crazy event, and we're gonna pinch it. We're gonna make a fictionalized version of it, and she's run off to basically to wrestle in front of people. Let's see. I'll show you some images. So there she is.
Parker's just mentioned Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, which is where the idea of logotherapy comes from.
Yep, everybody should read that.
Which is a great book and a fascinating man. So he noticed he was a concentration camp survivor, and he noticed that the people who survived were the ones who had something to go back to, or had something to some very good reason, some very good meaning in their lives,
or they had they had developed certain cognitive capabilities that would see them through times of isolation and hardship, like people who are really good at chess. Playing chess just with yourself in your mind in the concentration camp is a lifeline. It's something you can hold on to, something to keep you going. Whereas somebody who hasn't cultivated any part of themselves cognitively, they were more likely to give in to despair. Which in that environment, that's just resigning yourself to death. So anyway, this character here, this is Joyce. She's the alien who has run off to join our fictionalized version of Lucha Bavoom. We're calling it Lucha Alienzo, which means, fight on the canvas. But within Alienzo is alien. Alien. So that's the joke there. And 2 other characters have been sent to retrieve her, bring her home. It's going to be so the comic has just been online for the past couple of years, but we are moving it into print. We're going to have the first 2 print issues. They will exist in physical form sometime this week, or maybe early next week. And
congratulations, Cameron.
Thanks. Yeah, and this next chapter is going to take place in LA. So we had this conference call with lots of people who live in LA. Not lots, like three people who are Los Angelinos who were just throwing out ideas for the next chapter. And that went right up.
So you've got to crowdsource.
What's that?
Crowdsource storylines.
Say that again.
You crowdsource your storylines.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's something which is fascinating. It's probably quite trite to say it, but the internet. When I was writing my books, if I didn't know something, I could go and find it in books, or I could just get on social media and say, what does this part of the brain do? Or does anybody know someone who lives in this country? Stuff like that. So, yeah, they're much more collaborative works, and you've got access to everything else that anyone's ever written, practically, as well. Quite interesting. I think that's going to be. Well, I think it is super significant in the way that the printing press really changed how we think in terms of you start at one letter and you go straight through to the end. That's a completely different cognitive model than clicking through hyperlinks and bouncing around a network. And remember, there's a line from the Confessions of Saint Augustine, and he says that this is a guy who lived through all kinds of religious riots and craziness, and he said one of the scariest things that he ever saw, one of the most discomforting things he ever saw was I think it was a bishop or an abbot reading text without reading it out loud.
Oh, right. Thomas Aquinas could do that, and it was like a superpower.
You what, Kamo?
Thomas Aquinas was able to, his parlor trick was he could stare at a page, and his mouth would not move, and he could look at it for a few minutes, and then close the book and answer questions about what was on the page. And nobody else at the scriptorium could do that. He was the only person who could read silently. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's crazy. Really interesting to think that kind of brain capability was almost unheard of. It was a superpower once upon a time, and now pretty much everyone can do it. And so kind of watching my kids growing up with phones and stuff like that, just being able to bounce around, and I wonder what it's going to do for us.
So,
in terms of network,
let me put this guy up on screen here. Daniel Tammet. You heard of this guy? Let's see.
Daniel who?
He'll be on your screen here in just a second. Tammet.
Okay.
This guy.
Oh yeah.
So he has the ability to visualize enormous numbers, and he can learn languages very quickly. And when he was a child, he had a severe fever, which was debilitating. And after he recovered from the fever, then he started to display these, remarkable cognitive talents. So, yeah, here's another instance of a guy who was, boosted by illness. And I saw...
he was...
Go ahead.
But what I was going to say was, I believe it was epilepsy, actually. He had a round of severe epileptic fits, Daniel Tammet. He may have had a fever as well. But he was particularly epileptic as a child, and it was, and as I remember the story, I may be mistaken, but after a particularly severe epileptic fit, his epilepsy passed, and he's ridiculous. It wasn't he could read pi for like 5 hours and only pause to eat a banana, like that, or not read, just kind of regurgitate pi. And he learned Icelandic in a week.
Yeah, that's what I was working up to. I saw a TV show about his traveling to Iceland, and the Icelandic language is not a Romance language. It's not related in terms of its evolution to any other known spoken language. So it's very difficult for outsiders to learn, and because there's such a small population of people who speak it, there's not much reason for anybody to learn it. And yeah, he showed up and he walks around with this woman, and he's not, studying intensively. He's just sort of absorbing the language. And at the end of a week, he goes on a live TV show and he conducts, an interview in Icelandic. So
that's crazy, isn't it?
I would very much like to have that particular superpower. That would be great.
Yeah, there's been a couple of cases. There's a guy, I wrote about this in my second book, Neuroapocalypse. About Daniel Tammet, among other things. His autism is such that he can't tell left from right.
Oh, really?
And if he goes into a supermarket, he doesn't like going to the supermarket because he gets overwhelmed by all of the prices and all the information, just does his head in. I read that book, Thinking in Numbers. Fascinating guy. And a very kind guy, but he describes... I remember him describing how he was talking to someone whose son had just committed suicide. And he didn't really realize the impact of his questions to her. He was saying to her, how did you do it? And just throwing out all these questions without any understanding of what he might be doing to the other person. So I think autism carries, it carries these difficulties as well, poor guy.
Yeah.
But another really interesting thing about autism is we think about savants as having these incredible skills, but 1 in 10 autists has a detected heightened ability. Like they're really good at something, and it can be anything from from balance. There's a guy called J Mac who, about this guy. He was a basketball. He was really into basketball, and he was on a. He was like a high school basketball team mascot. And they wouldn't let him play because he was quite severely autistic. I mean, I think he does have a language, but they let him, and he used to, give people towels and bring them water and that kind of stuff. And he was completely obsessed by basketball. And then the last match of the season, they get him up on the, they let him play basically, and for the last 5 minutes. And his first shot went miles out, and his second shot went miles out. And then he starts. You can see this. There's a YouTube video of it. He starts landing 3-pointers from all over the court, and he scores an obscene amount of points in the final minutes of the game. And when he describes it, he describes seeing the basket as a big old dustbin that was huge. And the way that the autistic visual cortex in particular works is it seems to take it's much more the connections in autistic brains are much more numerous because it seems that they don't have synaptic pruning. So basically, but as a child produces loads and loads of synapses all over the place, and then they get kind of pruned down. But that doesn't really happen so much in autists. They've got this very, very diffuse like a kind of sponge in a way, and that can pick up information in the same way that the visual system can warp. The visual systems warp for people who aren't autistic as well. Like if people who have guns pointed at them, for example, they always, if you interview them afterwards, they always describe the gun as a bigger caliber than it was, and they describe people who went 2 meters away as being 5 meters away because that fear warps the visual scene.
What is it that warps it? Is it fear?
Yeah, fear magnifies those kind of things, yeah. Because it's, we think that we see the world, but we don't. We see the world filtered through our expectations of the world.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of those expectations come from our experience, and some of them are, genetic.
Yeah, and some of them come from our language as well, different languages. Mm-hmm. Japanese people and Americans, for example, they remember different things from a scene. Mm-hmm. And it seems to be related. I think it's related to how the language is structured.
Well, Japanese, you can negate an entire sentence that you've just said. Like you can just lay out a multi-phrase or multi-clause sentence that's very complex, and then you can get to the very end of the sentence and negate it, as if that was your intention the whole time, was to negate it, was to say all of this stuff that I'm saying is not true. And you know the language is set up that way, and I've heard that it evolved that way because social power dynamics in Japan are such that you don't tell people above you something they don't want to hear. So if, as you're describing something to somebody who is of higher status, if you can tell by their facial expressions they don't like what they're hearing, then you put that not at the end and you negate everything, and then you look for another way to communicate this unpleasant truth to this person who needs to hear it.
Yeah, and if you kind of wind that back a little bit further, back in the day you had the samurai who controlled the pump at the top of the hill, and then everybody else. And if you pissed off your neighbor, you could get your water cut off.
Or your head.
So it's very important that you keep good relationships with your neighbors in a country which has, sharp mountains, raging sea, not very much space for your paddy fields, and periodic tsunamis and earthquakes and all the rest. So yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. Yeah, and also another thing in Japan is a sentence is formed. I lived there for 6 years. A sentence is formed collectively. So you might introduce a subject. You might say pizza, and someone else will go, "Oh yes, let's eat pizza." Or three people might say, and normally the person who finishes the sentence is the high status person.
So you're
pizza. Some guy might say pizza, and then someone else will go, ne, pizza ne, and then the final person will go, "Yosh, tabemashou," like, yeah, let's eat it. It's very interesting. Go on, Camo, you were saying something.
I said Jozu desu ne.
Jozu ne. See, quiet.
No, you're supposed to say tondemonai.
Well, you're good.
The Japanese person cannot accept a compliment. They have to say, no, I'm just learning. So you're clearly a Westerner.
Yeah, I'm not Japanese. It's really good being a white man in Japan is great. Because if you can do those things, they think you're amazing. Yeah. If you can't do those things, they just think, well, it's just a foreigner who doesn't understand.
Right.
It's a really good place to be outside.
Yeah, I lived in Japan twice for a year each time.
What did you bring home?
What did I bring home? Memories, I guess. Not much.
Whereabouts were you?
The first time I lived in Nagoya, way out in the countryside.
Cool.
Oh, no. That was Niigata. Niigata is up north. Nagoya, okay. I lived pretty much in the city. So, I've had a rural Japanese experience and an urban Japanese experience.
Nice. How did you end up there? What dumped you in Japan?
The first time's just I went to school there. It was a college year in Japan program. And then after I graduated, I went back to teach English for a year and make some money. How can I fuse these layers? Oh, here we are. Merge down. That's what I'm looking for. All right. Anyway, I've squandered too much time on this. This is not anything I can bill for. So let's put this away. And
I've been looking at the chat. I've been missing your drawings there.
Oh, yeah. I've just been fooling around, really. Let's see.
Parker has a theory that cannabis pushes the brain in an autistic direction. I think you're right, actually. I think I know that psilocybin definitely produces these diffuse synaptic. Well, it's not quite synaptic connections, but it knocks out the anterior cingulate cortex and the parts of the brain which are kind of central controlling hubs, and means that other parts of the brain start to go into phase and start to communicate more directly. And I think you're right about cannabis. When you smoke cannabis, the kind of ideas, the kind of solutions to problems become much more diffuse, and you can kind of get lost down different tracks. And yeah, I mean, what he said here is that decreasing social skills, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
because it suddenly
go ahead.
It suddenly becomes like there's 100 different ways to answer a question, and you don't know what to say.
Right. Being tongue-tied is definitely a familiar effect of marijuana for me, in social situations. So it's kind of the anti-alcohol in that regard. Alcohol loosens the tongue, and marijuana deadens it, or it hampers it. Let's see, it's going to be.
Who's this guy?
This guy's name is Steve. He is he's the mechanic at the base. He's sort of a stopgap replacement for somebody who went missing. So there's a long backstory to all this stuff, but yeah, he keeps the flying saucers running, but he's such a workaholic, and he's so devoted to other people and helping the team that he frequently forgets to eat and drink, and he ends up collapsing from exhaustion. So one of the recurring situations in the comic is that somebody is taking him a juice box. Somebody's coming into the hangar where he's working and makes sure that he at least drinks something, so that he doesn't collapse from exhaustion, because everybody else has kind of like bullshit jobs. There's a chief administrator, but there's really nothing to administer. There's only like a handful of people working here. And then there's the middle management below the chief administrator, who really, her only job is to keep the chief administrator out of the way so he doesn't see any of what's actually happening under his watch. And then there's a head of security who there's really no security concerns to deal with, so she's just obsessed with pop culture and combat and, like playing video games online. Like all of these characters, they're overseeing an operation where aliens go out in flying saucers and they abduct people and they bring them back to the base to be anally probed. And none of the characters who are actually there on site doing the work think the work is worth doing. They don't see any reason to do it. For them, the idea of kidnapping people and anally probing them is as absurd to them as it is to us. But it's their job. It's their job. That's why they do it. But their job is meaningless. So, their whole struggle is basically to find meaning in a situation where they're doing a meaningless task.
And is this based on a personal experience you've had, Kemo?
It's based on a lifetime of working jobs.
So, what do you think's happening with bullshit jobs in 2020? Then, how do you think we come out of this?
I said bullshit jobs, but David Graeber wrote a book with that title, and he was talking about something different. He was talking about high-paid, high-status jobs which are completely unnecessary. Like, a dean at a university might have a staff of 15 administrative assistants, and there's nothing for any of them to do, but they're all making, $60,000 a year, and they've got a full benefits package, and there's nothing for them to do. They spend the day on Twitter, or they spend the day in pointless meetings. And I could go into some unstructured rant, but I've actually forgotten your question. What was your question?
What about bullshit jobs and where they go in 2020 or 2021,
So when I say bullshit jobs, I mean oppressive jobs, meaningless, like, the greeter at the Walmart Supercenter, or people working very difficult, demanding, physical labor or dangerous jobs that are not well paid, not well compensated, not high status. To me, that's what I think of when I think of a bullshit job. And I think, lots of people who in a previous generation would have had a career. They would have had, they would have been with one company for decades and then retired with full benefits. They're now working multiple, low status, sort of disposable jobs, either multiple at one time or a succession of them. And, that's been my life. So, from my perspective, it would be suicidal at this point to try to get back on that track, because I'm in my 50s and I wouldn't have time to establish any sort of security or comfort. So really, I'm at the point now where giving up art and going into, getting a real job would be a step down, both in pay and in the potential for it to pay off and, be something really lucrative.
I think alien anal probes sound more meaningful than some of the work you've done in the past then.
Oh, yeah. Like, I worked on fishing boats in Alaska. I've done various agricultural jobs, which are just really, really unpleasant. And then, I've done multiple sort of customer service oriented jobs where I'm on the phone or I'm on a answering email, and oh, that's miserable, miserable work.
And I think Andrew,
Yang?
what's his name? Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
I think he has the answer. And actually, David Graeber as well was he was he was in favour of people making art and poetry.
Yeah. Well, the problem is we still need humans to do certain types of work. We can't automate everything yet. AI is still narrow, it's still brittle, it still is dependent on human to define tasks for it and to tell it if it's doing things right or wrong, even if it has superhuman capabilities. So some people still have to work, and as humans, we have multiple axes along which we judge things morally, and we have this very understandable inborn free rider detection capabilities. We want to see if there's somebody who is benefiting from the collective efforts of everybody who isn't contributing. And for socially conservative people, that is really cranked up to 11. That desire to undercut the freeloaders. And in people who are more left in their orientation, many of them have so rejected the whole notion that we need to detect and punish freeloaders that they'll give away the store, because that's what's being given away is not something that they themselves produced, so they'll give it away freely. And I don't think either side really has struck the right balance. I mean, maybe the right balance is the competition between the two modes of thought. We need people who are sort of gross, uncaring social conservatives who say, better that people starve than give aid to people who don't deserve it. That's one poll, and the other poll is, well, everybody should make $1 million a year and be allowed to just write poetry or, smoke weed or whatever it is they want to do all day, and that we should have no distinctions, between in terms of rewards for effort, and that's pretty clearly dysfunctional. So I don't think that we need everybody to believe the same thing, for our civilization to prosper and advance.
Well, no, and absolutely not. I mean, an ecology makes a system more robust, doesn't it? An ecology of thought, certainly. It's been really interesting watching, again, sorry to talk about the boring virus, but the critique from the left has just been so weak, so incredibly weak. I'm getting my news from Fox News and The Spectator at the moment. That wouldn't happen a few years ago, because the left had almost nothing to say, and even some of the anarchists as well, responding to what I think are outrageous impositions on our liberties. But I think what you were saying about the devil makes work for idle hands. I think that freeloader detection, or that hatred of people who are lazy, I think again that might not be innate. I think that might be a Puritan. Something left over from the Puritan age, because I don't think the Mediterranean's like that. I think that's a kind of American Puritan, an English Puritan kind of idea. They seem to be much more happy chilling out with their families around the Mediterranean, taking a siesta in the middle of the day, and all of that.
Well,
having really long lunches.
Humanity is not a monolith. There's a big difference between living in a place without winter and a place with winter.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I gotta take a little break here. I'm actually gonna mute so you don't hear the toilet flush, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Let's see. Mute. I am back. So were you just responding to something in the chat there?
Yeah, talking about this sensitivity to touch, which I think is related to that, the fact that J-Max saw the basketball basket being larger, in the same way at touch. I mean, I've got a lot of autists in my family, and I'm pretty Asperger's as well. I had to be taught as a youngster to maintain eye contact, and it hasn't done me any harm. Except people thought it was a little bit strange in lots of places. But yeah, I'm sensitive to sound. Not so much sound. Actually, no, sound as well. I will often, if my wife is talking too loud, I ask her to turn it down. Be lying in bed and she'll be talking really loud. And light as well, and touch. There's certain times where I really don't like to be touched.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the chat now. Parker saying, between China sending fewer students to the U.S. and the virus, colleges are going to be tight with money. Well, certain colleges like the Ivy League schools here in the U.S., they are stinking rich. They're sitting on so much money. They wouldn't need to receive another tuition penny for the next couple decades. They'd be fine. But yeah, it's the smaller schools. Danny was also muted when KMO was away, for your information. Oh, sorry about that. You were just talking to yourself, Danny. I'm afraid.
You didn't miss one.
Maybe you can recap.
I don't know. I think we're in so much trouble, man. Like economically, the UK is spending more money. The deficit in the UK is greater than it was during the Second World War at the moment. As I understand it. But that's so crazy. It's so mental, and we move into a completely new economic mode after this, or even now, And we're looking at a K-shaped recovery as well. Some people have done really well out of coronavirus, and most people really, really haven't. And again, it gets a bit apocalyptic. But even before coronavirus, you had I think 2 million homeless people on the streets of the US. I don't know what the figures are in the UK, but a lot as well. That's a fucking army, man. You can do all sorts with that. That's just, it's waiting for, I don't know, either some kind of strong man. It could be a fascist, or it could be a religious leader, or it could be whatever. But you could do lots of damage with 2 million people. You could do lots of good with 2 million people.
Yeah. Donald Trump. One view of him is that he's this evil mastermind, and another view is that he's this, doofus who just stumbled in to the presidency. But from my perspective, it seems like, he's a guy who he can pretend to be a strongman fascist. Like he can appeal to people who would be attracted to a strong figure in troubled times. But he doesn't have the attention span. He doesn't have the follow through. He just doesn't. He would love to be a Vladimir Putin or a Rodrigo Duterte. I mean, he'd love to be a strong man and jailing journalists and such, but he just doesn't, he doesn't have the follow through. He doesn't have the attention span. He's just gets distracted. So I think there's a lot of people who. What's that?
You don't think that's part of the act? You think he's genuinely got an attention? I think you're right. I think you're right, but you don't think there's some kind of master plan going on here?
I don't. No, I mean, I'm not convinced of it, but I find the argument that he never intended to win the 2016 election fairly convincing. I think what he wanted to do was to narrowly lose to Clinton, claim that he was robbed, and then spin that into a renewed media career. To get his own show on Fox or something. And particularly, the night of the election, there's footage of his wife just livid that it looks like she's actually going to have to move into the White House and be the first lady. It's like, this wasn't supposed to happen. What's going on? So I don't know. But, once he's in, then his ego is invested in any contest he's in. So, I think this past election cycle, he really did intend to win. And I have no opinion as to whether he actually won or not. I just don't care. I have no dog in that fight.
Yeah, I think it. I'm glad to hear it. It's looking at American politics and taking out the foreign policy aspect to it just seems so ludicrous. You know, the people you've got in the Jesus Christ, what have you got going on in the White House at the moment?
We are headed into a renewed foreign military adventures.
Yeah, I think I like the Jungian analysis of Donald Trump as the archetype of the trickster. You know, just stirring it up, revealing some truths.
Yeah.
You know,
but not really having any well-formed agenda
I don't
beyond
think
that.
What did you say?
I said, and not having any well-formed agenda just beyond that, just beyond disruption.
But I wonder if that was his gift. You know, at least not successfully, you know, prosecuting a war in Iran, for example. He didn't do that. You know, that's you know, in my book, you know, he gets my. I don't know if he get my vote, but I think also, you know, we were talking before about moving from the individual to the network, and I think that's one of the things we're seeing with kind of current politics. It doesn't really the guy, the figurehead doesn't really matter. I don't know if it ever mattered, but I get the feeling it did actually. You've got some very kind of classy American presidents and Russian presidents in the past, and some strong figures. You know, Margaret Thatcher, for example. Like, I mean, I hate her, but she knew what her policy was. She certainly had and Reagan. You know, that particular
right. They were peers.
Marriage.
You know, they were ideological brethren, and they were in power at the same time, and they were enacting basically the same program on either side of the Atlantic.
Yeah,
it's kind of hard to think about one without the other, really.
Yeah, and it was very much their program, you know, which is not. I don't think that's the same now. I don't mean, you know, Biden. He can't remember. He doesn't know what his program is, clearly.
Yeah. No, Biden is just an empty presidency. It's just, you know, the minions can do whatever they want, and the Pentagon can have whatever it wants. Yeah. No, we're going to invade somebody. Let me tell you. Maybe not in 2021. Maybe they'll wait to 2022, but I think they're really anxious to get back into that game.
Do you think that the American public will buy it this time around?
The Clinton voters, you know, the Biden voters, they're not the people whose sons and daughters are going to die. And yeah, they'll be all for it. I think, you know, the Trump voters, the rural voters, the people who have sent the last, you know, they sent their last two generations of sons and daughters off to places like Afghanistan and Iraq and had them come back with, you know, severe burns and missing limbs and stuff. Those are the people I think who are going to put up with the biggest resistance, but I think it will not be a very organized or effective resistance. Anyway.
What do you think then? You think it just keeps on rolling? Because you seem to be, beginning of our conversation, you're saying, you know, the idea of we do just keep on rolling, don't we? Human beings do just seem to stay alive and stay doing our thing. But it does seem like things are changing, certainly in politics.
Well, individually we die. But, you know, from my perspective, like 2016, Bernie Sanders, you know, he was a fairly unknown figure outside of, you know, people who watch Washington, D.C. or people who live in Vermont. And, you know, he got up on stage with Hillary Clinton, and in the primaries, you know, it was clear throughout the Democratic Party, Hillary is the nominee. This whole primary process is a formality. Don't run. Nobody run against her. And she had, I forget the guy's name from Maryland, this one token opponent who had no name recognition, and there was never any idea whatsoever that he might win. And then Bernie Sanders, you know, who seemed like an absurd candidate. Like, he's so far left, nobody could possibly take him seriously, and he almost won. And it took a lot of, you know, backroom chicanery for him to lose. And again, I mean, even more so this time around. You know, he absolutely crushed the first few contests, and then just before Super Tuesday, you know, Obama got on the phone and convinced everybody except Elizabeth Warren to drop out the day before Super Tuesday and, you know, endorse Biden. And then and Warren stayed in to split any progressive vote, you know, to harm Sanders, and then she dropped out the next day. So, you know, that was such a trend. I mean, this election was stolen, but it was stolen in the primary. And, you know, the U.S. news media, you know, except for Fox News and, you know, it's also ran conservative brethren. They are just so obviously partisan in their reporting now. And they have been, you know, to the past 4 years, where they're just openly against Trump and openly refusing to cover anything that might be harmful or, you know, detrimental to Biden's chances, to the point where, you know, his son, Hunter Biden, had this no-show job where he made tens of thousands of dollars a month for doing nothing except having the last name Biden. And outlets like NPR, you know, National Public Radio, which I've spent my life listening to NPR, they wouldn't touch the story. And when asked why, they said, well, you know, it's a non-event. It's not real. It's just, you know, it's a smear campaign. And now after the election, we discover, oh, yeah, the FBI has been investigating that for the past 2 years, and they're taking it very seriously. You know?
Well, so this is a big thing, though, you know. Like, the thing when I was growing up, I'm 44 now. Mm-hmm. When I grew up, the institutions of England were something you could kind of lean on. They seemed solid, you know. We had our National Health Service. We had, you know, there was a policeman in my village who used to cycle around on his bicycle. We had the bank. You know, when I was a kid, I got those. I don't know if you have them, but like piggy banks with slits on their heads.
Yep.
You know, money seemed like a thing that was solid, but it's not anymore. Nope. Not since the bailouts. You know, it just seems like the only institution really still trustworthy in UK is the Postal Service. And in the US, I think, you know, the Postal Service got attacked by, again, in this last election, you know.
Well, yeah, so the Trump administration tried to starve the Postal Service to hamper the process of mail-in balloting.
Yeah, exactly. So when all of your, you know, that's not damage that gets undone, you know. When people mistrust, for example, the WHO, I mistrust. I think they're an awful organisation, and the instruments of power. You know, groups like Pfizer and GSK and Moderna and all these monsters, basically. I don't think that's repaired easier. So I think you're right. You know, the media is continuing putting out its nonsense, but I don't know how long people are going to be listening to that.
Well, I think it's very revealing that the biggest voice, you know, in terms of a unified audience that hangs on his every word, Joe Rogan has a bigger audience than all of the mainstream commentators on MSNBC, what's the one that they only play in airports, CNN, you know, National Public Radio, New York Times. I mean, all of those other mainstream pundits together don't have a fraction of Joe Rogan's audience.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, that's what made Andrew Yang, you know, that's why he was on the debate stage. He got such a boost from his Joe Rogan appearance. And, you know, Joe Rogan is very plain spoken and very sort of down to earth and commonsensical in his analysis, which, you know, so much of the mainstream analysis has, you know, it's so systematically dishonest that it can't really make coherent statements about all manner of subject matter. And Joe Rogan doesn't have that limitation, which is why, and he's just, and, you know, he's a comedian. He's a very good, effective communicator. I cannot imagine that he would ever run for president, but if he did, he'd have you know, he would be the guy to beat. He would be the presumed winner.
That's an interesting idea. Has anyone asked him if he wants to run for president?
Oh, I'm sure they have, and I know his answer is fuck no. Why would I do that?
Yeah. Well, he listens, doesn't he? He's a thoughtful guy.
Yeah.
And he sits there listening. I really liked his. I like the way he pushed. Who's the guy? Glenn Greenwald as well. I think it's some really good journalism coming out of him. Mm-hmm. Kind of, and he's again. These are not right wing figures or left wing figures. You know, he gets accused of enabling Trump or whatever.
Oh well, for the American left, Joe Rogan is a Nazi. He's, you know, Hitler personified. But well, anybody they disagree with about anything at all is Nazi, you know, is Hitler. All right. So I think you are even further north than I am. And you're 5 hours in the future, so it's surely pitch black where you are, right?
Yeah. It gets dark about 4:30 here. Yes, when my kids go to school, it's still dark. It's pretty crossy time of the year. I don't mind, actually, but people who suffer with seasonally affected depression, they have a bad time this time of year.
Oh, I had a hard time with that when I lived in Seattle.
Was that further north than you are?
It's just a little bit further north than here, but like here it gets cold and it snows, and it's winter. So clearly there's something other than just a lack of sunlight going on. Whereas in Seattle, it's pretty temperate year round. It's pretty comfortable. But as, we progress into November and December, it's like when I worked at Amazon, I walked to work in the dark. I would go out at lunchtime and it would be light. And then when I got out to go home, it was dark. And I would go, long periods without ever seeing the sun. And it was very depressing. But there was a plant store in the Pike Place Market, world famous, tourist destination, Pike Place Market. There was a store called Malbach's that sold plants. And I would go in there and just stand in the rows of plants with all the fluorescent tubes, and all the life-giving light that they provided. And that was my little respite from the constant oppression of the Seattle winter. And the first year that I was there, it rained every single day for a couple months. And then on the day, like if it had rained one more day, we would have broken a record. And at least, there's this little psychological reward there. At least I have endured the longest days of continuous rain in Seattle ever. And the day that would have broken the record, it didn't rain. And then the next day it started raining again, and it rained seemingly forever, until the glorious summer came. And summers there are absolutely glorious.
Well, you've moved around a lot. Are you staying where you are now? Is that enough?
Nope. No, I'm going to keep moving.
Yeah? Where next?
Well, just before the pandemic hit, I was in motion to move to Puerto Rico.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big move, no?
It's not so big. I mean, it's in the U.S., so it's not like I'm moving to another country.
And what was why were you thinking of doing that?
Because for about the same amount that I spend to live here, I could live there and be in a city where there are people and things happening, rather than this little.
That was after the what was it? Hurricanes.
Yeah, they had 2 bad hurricanes, and then just earlier this year they had an earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe the earthquake was last year, but. Yeah, they've been losing population. Because people in Puerto Rico are American citizens, they can just move to the mainland. They don't need to get a visa or anything like that. And they had been losing people at a sort of steady trickle over the last decade, but after the hurricanes and the earthquake, people just started, just bailing. So the Puerto Rican government is working really hard to get people to move there. Tax incentives, like you don't have to pay federal income tax if you live on the island.
We've got a good tradition of that as well in the States, haven't you? Kind of economic moving around.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's kind of a sore spot for me. There's this economist named Tyler Cowen, and he wrote a book a couple years ago, and all the liberal outlets just celebrated him. And the thesis of the book was that the problem economically with the U.S. now is that people are too timid and they're not willing to take risks. They're not willing to start a new business, or they're not willing to move to another part of the country where there's more economic opportunity. They're too settled and too satisfied. And, that is a narrative just custom designed to ingratiate him with the elite. The problem's not anything to do with policy. It's not anything to do with this grotesque concentration of wealth that has happened in the past couple decades. The problem is the working people. They're not willing to suck it up and, take more abuse and risk losing everything that they have. So, somebody just propagating that message, they will be celebrated.
Right. Again, it seems to be culminating towards something. It seems to be moving towards something. It doesn't seem like a very sustainable situation.
Well, on a long enough timeline, survivability drops to 0. Yeah.
We have a very strange view of the US in England. It's
I do.
we
Or you do? Oh, in
no,
England.
the English
England,
people,
right?
English people do. Yeah, we have. I think the US has a very strange view of people in England as well.
Americans love British people.
Yeah, no, I think they do. Yeah,
you're a celebrity
my
if you
accent
come over here.
got me lots of friends when I was.
I bet it got you laid. I bet it got you drinks. Anyway, go ahead. You were saying.
I should have exploited that more, actually.
What's that?
Or maybe my wife would have objected.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But yeah, we have a. We tend to think of guns.
Mm-hmm.
That's the perspective that a lot of English people have on the US.
Well, we do have a lot of guns here.
Yeah, my dad always wanted to live in the US. When he was a young man, very young, must have been 14 or something. He saw he was at boarding school in South Africa, and his teacher got all the boys out in the twilight on the what do you call it, on the playing field, and then they said, "Hey, look at that," and it was Sputnik.
Oh wow!
Going across the horizon. Yeah, so he saw Sputnik, and that fear of the Russians never left him. One of my best friends in England is Russian, and it's quite funny. I actually got him to invite my folks around to dinner, and he's become quite friendly with my Russian friend, my folks. But he never met a Russian until he was probably in his 70s, but maintained this fear of Russians, and grew up in South Africa as well. It had a really strong anti-communist vibe, because the ANC was very influenced by the kind of communist countries as well.
Yep.
So he was always very in favour of kind of US policy, kind of romanticised the country.
If you have money, it's a fun place to be. There's a lot to do, a lot of possibilities. If you don't have money, it's a struggle. I mean, that's
last time I went there. I was
true anywhere.
I was just travelling through, and I was going to Brazil, and my plane touched down in George Bush International in Texas.
Oh.
And I had I got very thoroughly searched, running tissues around my computer to look for explosives and all the rest. And it was kind of cartoonish, The some people searching me were talking about how expensive their health insurance was. But then you come out of it. No, actually, at one point they took a photo of me, and I said, "Is it a nice one?" And the guy goes, "It's a mugshot, sir." Okay.
We are not your friends. Do not try to make friendly conversation with us.
No, exactly. And then I came into this kind of, it was like Happy Days or something. The whole airport was done up like a 50s diner. Well, that was my memory of it as well.
Now, the funny thing about your story for me is the fact that it is the construction of the sentence, "It's a mugshot, comma, sir."
Yeah.
It's like, we are security personnel. You are at our mercy. We can do whatever we want, but we're also very conscious of the fact that we are employees. We are in service, and we are going to address you. We are going to acknowledge, we're going to be simultaneously abusive and respectful.
Yeah. I think the
very characteristic of American law enforcement.
Well, indeed, yeah. I remember actually asking directions, and I can't remember. It was one time I was in the States. I remember I was going to the MAPS conference in Oakland, and asking directions of some cops in a car, and they jumped out of the car in order to answer my question. And I thought that was strange, because in England you probably wouldn't do that. In fact, they definitely wouldn't do that. I don't know if it was like a kind of because it's just a bit more dangerous to be a copper.
You don't approach cops in cars. That's not done. So, yeah, they were probably very alarmed. A lot of police cars have written on the door, "Do not approach."
Really?
Yeah. If your story, if I was hearing your story from somebody else, and they say, "Oh, yeah, my friend Danny, he went to the U.S. and he needed directions, and he walked up to a cop car and tapped on the window and they killed him," I wouldn't doubt it. It wouldn't be...
Really?
It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, you don't approach police in their car. That's just not, that's not done.
That's because they're worried that you're going to kill them, or
Yeah,
like why not?
no, exactly right. I mean, they think that you're walking up to the car to shoot them, and that happens. You know, people hate the police. When I was living in New York City, you know, there was Freddie Gray, I think was the name of the guy, who in Baltimore, some police put this guy in the back of a van, and then they drove very erratically, so he'd get thrown around, and he died from that. You know, he hit his head on the side of the van, and they didn't give him medical attention, and he died. And that sparked riots, and a lot of people were very angry. And one guy from Baltimore, guess he couldn't kill any local police, he went to New York City. And he just approached two random police officers sitting in a car, and he was angry at the white supremacy that is at work in the policing here in the U.S., but the two guys that he shot were an Asian cop and a Latino cop. But he murdered the two of them and, was caught, obviously, in short order. He's probably in prison right now. But, yeah, I mean, people hate the police, and police do get killed. But, the police kill a lot more civilians than civilians kill police here. And I'm very conflicted, because police officers are not well paid. They're not rich. They're not, they don't have more than their share. But they preserve the concentration of wealth, and they preserve the privileges of the powerful.
Yeah.
So, they do harm. But, I see them like police dogs. I love dogs. But police dogs, they're a menace. It's a very bad use of all the canine capabilities.
Right. We had a case just the other day in the UK because obviously people have started throwing illegal parties in England because I don't think anyone would go a whole year without without going to parties. Yeah. But certainly not English people. We've got a very strong culture of illegal raves here. When I was growing up, that was what we did.
Right.
And there was some woman who got savaged the other day by a canine.
Wow.
Unit had her calf torn through to the bone.
Yeah, those dogs' jaws are made for killing. That's what they're for.
How's your picture looking good?
Oh, thanks. This is just a bio for this character. We're redoing the website. So all the characters, we need full body images of each character on a blank background. So that's what I'm creating here.
Do you miss working with pen and paper, or are you happy in that medium?
I'm happy in the digital medium.
Those images I showed you at the beginning, Carolina, she does her images in this particular type of. I don't know if it's the same program you've got, but when she was painting, her paintings were massive, and obviously she's in lockdown in a tiny place, and she hasn't got access to a studio, so she's gone digital, like the rest of us. I miss it really.
I do look back fondly on the days of doing comics on paper and then taking all the big boards to the Kinkos and having them bound up in what are called ash cans, like these little self-made, self-produced comic books. That was very enjoyable. Fun memories, but I'm not going back to pen and paper. That's done. That's over.
We've got this amazing project, I haven't told you about it, which is it was with a tree called Pernambuco wood, and there's a gentleman by the name of Marco Raposo who is a bow maker and quite influential in the Brazilian bow making industry. He kind of he leveled it up. Brazilian violin bows used to be thought of as kind of second rate, kind of the same way we used to think of Chinese goods, really.
That's funny. When you said violin bows, up to that point, I thought you meant he was bow maker like archery. He made.
Well, exactly. It's because you're American. You're thinking about weapons. But,
I did play the violin as a child.
right. So your bow would have been made out of Pernambuco wood or Brazil wood. Pau Brasileiro it's called. And that tree has been, how do you spell that word? Pernambuco. I'll write it here. This is for Parker. So that Pernambuco. So that wood has a particular flexibility, particular resonance, particular strength, which meant that basically the concave bow, could be created. So since 1720, pretty much all the bows in the world, and especially since the 1750s, all the bows in the world have been made out of Pernambuco wood. And from that time, the Atlantic forest has been reduced by 93%, and the remaining 7% has been selectively logged for Pernambuco wood, which means that the last survey they found in one traditional area which traditionally had a load of this stuff, they found less than 1,500 trees. And it looks like there's only a few thousand of these trees, basically, in the wild in Brazil. So this guy's got a project with us where he wants to plant, I'm just signing a contract for it probably tomorrow, where he wants to plant 50,000 trees. And this is a kind of 50,000 saplings. He's done it in the past. He did 200,000 saplings back in 2004. So they're all growing quite nicely. Well, some of them are growing quite nicely. But now he's doing some more research on how to make them better. And I asked him. I said, "Well, this is great. How about you divide them and put some of them into spring restorations? Because there's a lot of springs, a lot of degraded and dried up springs in Brazil." And the hydrological systems in Brazil are absolutely screwed, which is why they're suffering desertification, and that affects the rainfall in North Africa and all over the world, basically. So we've got this project which is about that. It's about planting trees for violin bows, and at the moment, what I'm hoping to do is to broaden that out into a more broad campaign, which is looking at other woods which are used to make trees. For example, jacarandá, which is rosewood in English, is what guitars are made of, and most guitars. And then you've got a whole load of other classical instruments, bassoons and oboes and all that kind of stuff, which are all made of different hardwoods. Well, they're not. They're made of a series of hardwoods. So what we're looking for, and I don't know if you know anyone in your community who is linked into the classical music world and interested in ecology, because we're looking for people who will be able to talk to that community. And it's a community which has a fair amount of status and a fair amount of cash. And also all of the orchestras that I'm aware of have published statements on their ecological values, because flying an orchestra around the world is quite a heavy carbon footprint.
Oh yeah.
So they're all doing kind of planting, or they're all talking about doing planting initiatives, but I don't think that many of them have really got a very coherent plan, and certainly a lot of carbon offsetting. It ends up in IKEA furniture and stuff like that that's going to end up on a junkyard in 20, 30 years anyway. So it doesn't really store carbon for very long. So that's a kind of if you can think of anyone in your community, in the steamroll community, who is into classical music and into trees, then you must send them my way.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking that most of our conversation I'm going to use to create an episode of the C-Realm Vault, but that bit I can definitely put on a main, free C-Realm podcast that more people will hear.
Okay.
And in fact, on that same note, would you give just an encapsulated pitch again with regard to the psychedelic art that you're selling and why you're trying to raise money?
Yeah, when's it going out?
I cannot promise a specific date, I'm afraid.
Okay.
It's been a while since I put out one of the free ones.
Okay. So we have a series of artists. 7 artists have given us their artwork to an art gallery, which is online. I'm going to start again. Actually, I'm going to be a little bit more coherent.
Okay.
Rain is an organisation dedicated to community-led agroforestry projects and reforestation projects in Brazil. We work with indigenous cultures. We work with rural poor people. We work, for example, we've got in Recife, in an urban centre of Recife, we're working with Black Women's Group to do things like popular education around composting and how to plant medicinal plants and all the kind of stuff that the agroecology that you can do in an urban context. And one of our ways of raising money is selling art, which has been donated by 7 different artists. So if you go and check out our website, which is rainumbrella.org, and then you'll find your way to the artists page on there. We've got a bunch of artists, including Anderson Di Bernardi and a few others, who are every print that we sell, 40% goes to the artist and 60% goes to reforestation projects in Brazil. So if you want to buy a present for somebody, then go along and check it out. And if you've got loads of money and you want to get a Pablo Amaringo original from the early phase of his career, then talk to me as well, because I'm helping out Luis Eduardo Luna sell that art.
I would very much like to have a Pablo Amaringo original hanging on my wall, but I think I will have to settle for a digital reproduction portrayed on a screen. But yeah, there are folks who may hear this who are in a different circumstance. So if so, get in touch with Danny, or you can get in touch with me. My email address, as you probably know, is kmo@crealm.com. That's the letter C and then a dash and then REALM, crealm.com. Alrighty, and now we can go back to just talking about whatever.
You must. How many times have you said how to spell C-realm?
Thousands. Many, yes. I try not to do it in a sing-song way, but it's something I've said many times. Yeah. All right. How do I set this to have a transparent background?
Let's have a look. Oh no, okay. It just looks like it looks like a bunch of pallets.
Yeah. You know, this is a sort of kludgy way to work around this, but what I'll do is I will just do a Google search for PNG transparent and images, please. And I'll just grab one like this one. Is this a PNG?
Outrageous, Cameron.
And then I'll just take it into Photoshop and change the dimensions. But this is probably not actually what I'm looking for. Let's see. Yeah. Let's try it. Oh, it's more than I wanted. What is all this?
What are you looking for?
I'm just looking to see what image type that is, if it's a PNG or not.
Yeah, but what type of image are you looking for then? I mean, I know
I'm looking for a blank PNG that I can save and open in Photoshop and change the dimensions to what I need it to be so that I can post this character onto a transparent background and send it off to the web designer. Okay, well, skip all that. Let's see. How about this one? And that is not a PNG. All right, it's a JPEG. But you know what? I've probably got one somewhere already. Let's see. Anyway, while I fiddle around, what's the next topic we can jump on?
Right. Well, what do we talk about? You've done enough on drugs, no?
Oh, drugs are always fun. Hey, I can tell you about, I don't know if it quite qualifies as a drug. It's more of a hormone, but I started testosterone replacement therapy this year. I had been thinking about it for many years, and I'm 52 now, and I have a psychological dependency on weightlifting. If I stop going to the gym for any length of time, my mood just crashes, and it seems like every aspect of my life suffers. You know, if I'm not working out, it seems like I have more money trouble. Or if I'm not working out,
right.
Just everything, you know, relationships, everything, just it gets dark and bad. And so when COVID hit, the gym closed. And after about a month of not working out, I was at a real low psychologically. And I started thinking about TRT again, and there are doctors who will prescribe it for you, sight unseen. Just fill out a little form, and you are diagnosed as needing more testosterone. And so I got on it, and the first 6 weeks are nerve-wracking because there's nothing happening. This is snake oil, this is bullshit, oh my, and of course I'm in a bad place psychologically anyway, so I'm just catastrophizing about it. And then it started to kick in, and the first effects are psychological, and it's just sort of across the board, everything just got better. Just everything. There's nothing in particular I can point to say, oh yes, this is the effect of the TRT. It's just everything got better. And then the gym opened up again, and I went back, and then, TRT plus weightlifting, that felt really good. And now my gym just closed for good. They've closed their doors. They cannot make a living with, in COVID times. Mm. So this is week 2 of no gym. So far, I'm okay.
I mean, it's fairly... You don't need too much equipment, though. You can go and find something heavy to lift, no?
You would think that. And I have some weights here in my apartment. But the stuff that I think is really most beneficial psychologically is the really, the heavy full body motions like squats and deadlifts and stuff that I simply cannot do here at home. But we'll see. I'm gonna try to substitute yoga. Yoga.
I was just thinking of natural. I mean, excuse me. Is there any downside to TRT?
Probably. Not that I've experienced, but I'm sure if I were to just go to Google and type in TRT side effects, there would be bad stuff. I've heard it can cause skin problems, like acne.
Right. Okay. It's quite nice to have acne in your 50s.
Oh no! I've had pimples popping up on my face for my full 52 years. I would be happy to leave it behind. If I could go back in time and tell my 17-year-old self, how long am I going to have acne? Forever. I might have just offed myself.
I've just started with ashwagandha, which is it's an alternative to. I didn't take it actually for the same reason. The other reason is I've got a kind of adrenal overload thing. I've been going really hard for ages, and parts of my body are just collapsing.
I take ashwagandha daily. I take it every day.
What do you say?
I take ashwagandha every day.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's good. Yeah,
good for keeping the blood pressure down.
And were you taking that before the TRT as well?
No, I started the TRT first.
Okay. Interesting. And do you think you'll keep that up? Do you reckon you'll keep it up indefinitely? Or?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've been on a few forums with people comparing notes on that, and I hear that getting off of it is really hard. Like everything that you took it to get away from comes crashing back down on you. So yeah, I have no intention of stopping.
Well, you're looking well.
Giving myself injections was a hurdle. I had never done that before. And there's 2 things that I take. There's one, I can't bring the whole name to mind, but basically, if you just take testosterone and nothing else, then your gonads kind of quit. They say, oh, well, we don't need to produce testosterone anymore. It's being introduced exogenously, so we're done. See you later. So one of the things that I have to inject, it's a subcutaneous injection, which is very easy. And I do that twice a week, and that's just to keep, my testes doing their job. And then I inject the actual testosterone once a week, and that's an intramuscular injection. So it's a much deeper injection, into muscle mass, and it's harder to push that plunger down and actually get the stuff, into the muscle. And it's not trivial. I mean, it's and you can't really wiggle around. If you wiggle the needle around when it's down in deep, then you can injure yourself. So that was a hurdle. I was really anxious about that the first few times, but I'm over it.
I was in a taxi the other day, and I was in Brighton, and we went past I think it was one of the universities there. The taxi driver goes, "Oh, my wife's in there today. She's doing the COVID tests." I said, "Oh, that's interesting. Is she a nurse?" And he said, "No, she's an airline stewardess."
She's getting tested?
That's interesting. No, performing the tests.
Huh.
And And then he said, "Yeah, and she's doing the vaccinations as well." And I said, "Oh, I was kind of joking." I said, "Oh, what could possibly go wrong?" And he said, "Yeah, they gave her 2 hours training as well."
Oh, the whole 2 hours. Well, she's an expert then.
Yeah, so that's what's going on in England. What's going on there? But no, I'm quite sceptical of that particular vaccination.
But the test it's just a swab in the back of the nose. It's not anything terribly difficult to administer.
Yeah, there's other kind of problems with how many cycles you do. We've got 7-Eleven making those tests now, apparently.
Really?
And kind of no particular protocol on how many cycles are done. I'm very skeptical. There was one estimate of between, I think, was it 4 and 30% false positives on the PCR test, which
really?
Wasn't actually invented in order to test. Yeah.
A test with a 30% false positive rate is not a test at all. Yeah,
indeed. I mean, so they haven't actually published what the false positive rate is. They haven't published it. So it's all kind of guesswork at this point. But very, very sketchy. You can manufacture an entire pandemic especially seeing as a COVID case is not someone who's at this point in history is not someone who's got losing sense of smell and etc. It's someone who shows up with a test which is positive, which has never been the same for any other disease in the past. If you have flu, because you've got joint pain and stuff like that, not because you've got flu antigens in your body. I think in the UK that's what it's like there. But in the UK, 50% of National Health Service workers have said they're uneasy about taking the test. Taking the vaccination.
I'm in no hurry to get it. That's for sure.
Yeah, watch to see what happens. I thought that was really revealing. 2 hours. What could go wrong? I've never given an injection, but as you describe it, it's not. Yeah, like you say, it's not trivial, is it?
The subcutaneous, which is just under the skin, that's trivial. I mean, I'd never done it before, so the first time I was nervous, but thereafter I was fine. I would still be. I would not. I would have to be in dire need to attempt a intravenous injection. That's still quite daunting.
I don't know if the COVID vaccination is intramuscular or subcutaneous. I'm thinking back to I went to go and visit a friend of mine who'd moved to Ireland and started studying veterinary science, and she'd remembered me from back in the day when I used to be really into ketamine. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't into ketamine at that point. I'd given up ketamine, but she had got some syringes for me as a present. So I thought I should probably give it a go, and that was intramuscular, but I didn't do it myself. I got someone else to do it.
I'm sorry, what was in the syringe? Was it ketamine?
Yeah, ketamine, yeah.
Huh.
It was a weird one, actually. It was really very clear. It said, I'm going, it said, I'm going to take, you took me to a certain place, and it said, I'm going to take you this far and no further. And I went, okay, fair enough. And that was on the first day I got to Ireland. And I left after about 10 days. And on the last night, I kind of put some more into the syringe and I gave it another go. And it said exactly the same thing. I'm going to take you this far and no further. And then I got on the boat. I can't remember where from. I think Belfast to Liverpool. And I got off the boat at Liverpool. And when you get off the boat and you have your sea legs?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah.
I had my sea legs for a week, and then another week, and then I started to panic. I took up Tai Chi and all this kind of stuff to try and get my balance back. It was really weird. And, I'm willing to believe that it could have been some kind of inner ear infection that I happened to pick up on the boat on the way back or whatever it might have been. But, it certainly gave me a bit of a fright for that particular chemical.
I've read a lot about ketamine, and I've insufflated it. Done a few lines, but I've never visited the K-hole, as it's called. Never got to that level.
You want to keep trying, or do you think that's when you're going to leave for the youngsters?
If I was in a place where it presented itself to me organically, I might, but I'm not going to go seek it out.
I don't think it's very organic by its nature.
No, I mean the situation being organic.
I know.
But no, it's not high on my list. It's kind of like DMT, you know. If I was in the right place with the right people, right situation, I'd give that another go. But yeah, it used to be a strong desire of mine, and it's not so much anymore.
Is that since you've got on the testosterone, or? Yeah.
You know,
my daughter crashing around next to me.
Yeah. What to say about that? You know, I've had one really successful DMT trip, and I'm still kind of processing that. That was just a few years ago.
Yeah, quite interesting. Jeremy Narby, I think he took ayahuasca once, wrote a book about it. I think his next time it might have been 10 years later. Integrating it for 10 years. In my tradition, which is Daini, people take it every 2 weeks. Not DMT, ayahuasca.
Right. Oh, I would happily drink ayahuasca again. Let's see.
Yeah, so some of the research I've been doing over the last couple of years is about the anointing oil in the Bible and how it works. And it's pretty interesting stuff. It's a mixture of 4 different herbs or resins, one of which is cinnamon verum, one of which is another type of cinnamon called cinnamon cassia, one of which is myrrh, and one of which is cannabis. It seems very likely that it's cannabis, and the evidence is all pointing towards that. And this is an oil which is massaged all over the body. It seems it's called shemen hamishcha, and the word mishcha comes from the word masha, which means to wipe or to paint. It's also the place we get the word Mashiach from, which means Messiah. So the Messiah is the anointed one,
right.
And this is the stuff they were anointed with. And it used to be a king, but later it kind of got changed into this savior figure. But back in the day, a Mashiach was anointed king. And the oil itself is super interesting. It works in a slightly similar way to ayahuasca in that it works on the cytochrome enzyme system. And the cytochrome system has about 51, if I remember correctly, different enzymes in it. And 6 of them are involved in breaking down drugs. In fact, these 6 break down 99% of the drugs you would possibly encounter. And as they're enzymes, they can be inhibited by stuff. And 5 of them are inhibited by cinnamon verum, and 1 of them is inhibited by cassia. So the mixture of these 2 different plants, these 2 species of cinnamon, wipes out your body's defense system and leaves you open to whatever drugs you might take. And myrrh itself is a super interesting one. Myrrh has got 3 different opioid receptor agonists. It works on the same system as opium and heroin and those kind of things, although it works in a slightly different way. And then cannabis, of course, does all the things that it does, plus a whole lot more if you inhibit your enzymes. And this was the first stage of what the priests did when they went into the tabernacle, which is the tent, the tent where Yahweh dwells. And the second stage was different. At the second stage, the high priest and all the other priests separate, and all the other priests, they go and they eat something called showbread. I'm actually going to find you a quote from the Talmud, which is quite interesting about showbread. It says here, in the high priest Simeon the upright's time, a blessing was sent into the Omer that the 2 loaves of bread and the showbread, and every priest who received only the size of an olive became satiated, and some was left over. But after him these things were cursed, and every priest got only the size of a bean. So we're talking about a really small dose here. Mm-hmm. And the delicate priests refused to take it all together, but the voracious ones accepted and consumed. It once happened, one took his own share and his fellows. He was nicknamed Robber till his death. Which seems very much like a drug experience rather than a snack in the tabernacle, Right. Tiny little dose. Well, used to be made there.
It seems like ayahuasca in that, you're combining things so that something which otherwise would not be effective because your body has defenses against it becomes effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing, so that's what the most of the priests take. and they take it all together. And the high priest goes off, and he goes off on his own into the back, the kind of the deepest chamber of the tabernacle, which is a 4.5 meter cubed, extremely tightly sealed hot box, basically. It's got 4 different materials pulled tight over a frame. The frame's made out of acacia, which is quite interesting in itself. And then a thick veil, and the veil is described as the thickness of a man's hand, or a man's hand span. So it's like, and that's different to the veil at the front of the tabernacle, which is to keep people's prying eyes out. This is an extra chamber in the back, and it's got a super, super thick veil or screen, and seems to be constructed very much to keep smoke in. And then what the high priest would do is he'd take handfuls of finely ground incense and burn them on the censer. And we know what was in this incense. And the incense was contains a bunch of stuff. It contains spikenard, for example, which boosts dopamine and boosts GABA and boosts serotonin. And it contains frankincense, which works on the GABA system, which is what Valium works on.
Oh, really?
And what else does it contain? God, my mind is just emptied now. I'm actually going to look it up because it's got 16 different ingredients, all of which, about 12 of which are psychoactive in some dimension or other. And the high priest would go in there, and he only has one thing in his hands, where he's got a finely ground incense in handfuls, so loads of it, in a small box, and a censer. And then he would sit in this smoke, and he would see angels and talk to angels, and that was what he did. Other things it's got in there is labdaman, which is that's an interesting one. It's what used to be rubbed into Pharaoh's false beard, which is a pretty weird way of administering a drug. But that's also a GABA receptor agonist. It works on the GABA system. And then it contains crocin and quercetin. Those crocin, for example, if you give it to rats, it alters their... basically, they get more erections than normally, so it may be useful for you. You could go along with your testosterone. I was joking. And it alters their mount behaviour. And then what else have we got?
What do you mean it alters their mount behaviour? What is that?
It means that they try to mount other rats. Uh-huh. They try to have sex with other rats more often if you give them crocin and quercetin. And you've also got saffron. Saffron's an interesting one. That used to be used by in Islamic jurisprudence. Saffron is one of the drugs which gives joy. It's one of the permitted drugs in the Islamic tradition. You've got high grade myrrh. You've got stacta, which is high grade myrrh, and then you've got I mentioned galbanum already. But you've got all these different. What's the other one? Saffron we mentioned before. That's in Chinese joss sticks as well, and it contains all kinds of exciting things. So you've got this very, very complex pharmacology, which we didn't discover enzyme inhibition in the West until I think we're talking about the 1950s or something like that. And the shamans in the jungle were using it at least 1,000 years ago. We've got evidence of ayahuasca vine and DMT containing, I think it's seeds being kept together in a pouch. And that was actually not even found in the Amazon, that was found in the Andes. So it was not only was it used in the Amazon, but it was also exported to the Andes, which is quite far away, considering the times. And I find that fascinating that and this goes back all the way back to Egypt. In the Middle Bronze Age in Egypt, they were mixing myrrh, cinnamon, and cassia, these 2 different types of cinnamon as well. So I published that in the Journal of Psychoactive Substances in a peer-reviewed journal about psychopharmacology, which I'm very proud of. It's the only... No, I did... Yeah, it's my... I've actually got 2 published articles, but I'm not a psychopharmacologist. But I did discover something in the Bible which no one else had noticed. My rabbi ancestors would have been very proud of me, I think. Actually, they'd probably be disgusted.
Maybe both at the same time. Maybe
You okay, mate?
proud of you for spotting what had been missed, but not so pleased that it was this frivolous drug stuff, which clearly wasn't frivolous, 2,000 years ago or more.
Well, it had taboos on it. If you made it and put it upon a stranger, you could be cast out of the tribe or killed. So there's all these kind of taboos, and one of the taboos around it as well, actually, is you're not allowed to get drunk before you take it, which is a very good idea because it's full of tranquilizers.
Right.
That's what for Jimi Hendrix. And it also, you're not allowed to leave the tabernacle when you have the oil upon you.
Right.
So don't go stumbling around the streets when you're high on this stuff.
It's like the Krakion for the Greeks. Like you only take it at the temple, and if you try to take it home, it was punishable by death, using it outside of its, the context that it was meant for.
Right. Well, yeah, I know there was a guy who was exiled, wasn't he? A friend of Plato, and not a platonic friend of Plato, it seems. Quite a lot of these things also they date back to to Egypt as well. There's an incense called Kithi, which is burned at a temple on the Nile. It's called the Temple of Edfu. And it's produced in a very similar way. It's steeped in wine. And it also contains myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, mastic, which is chewing gum, but it's also a stimulant, saffron and spikenard, and some other ingredients as well. So it seems that there's this tradition that finds its way into the Bible from the Egyptian tradition. And the Egyptians were master apothecaries. These guys were practicing, surgery and using cannabis massages and all kinds of different stuff. They invented antibiotics, as far as I understand it. Used honey as an antibiotic.
So we haven't looked at the chat recently, but Parker's got a steady stream of comments here.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
and they're time coded, so some of them are from quite some time ago, but I can tell. Like he says,
Sorry, Parker.
Orchestras are suffering from the pandemic along with other live music. He says art for reforestation. Christianity, it's not just about alcohol. Alcohol also affects GABA along with all the benzos. Weird, a beard oil / psychedelic substance. Yeah, high-grade myrrh. That's awesome, Danny. He said just a couple minutes ago. Yeah, 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, well, thanks, Parker. That's all in a book called Neuroapocalypse. And in fact, I've got other research there's a Lucid News article which looks at, there was a, what's the name of the temple? I've forgotten the name of the temple now. It'll come back to me. But a temple in the south of southern Judah, which was from before the reforms of Hezekiah, I believe. So this is a Jewish temple, or let's say an Israelitish temple, and they burned frankincense and cannabis in this temple. They found residues from this thing, and like the newspaper, they were going, "Oh, it's got cannabis in it." But the combination of frankincense and cannabis is absolutely fascinating. Like in the dopamine system, for example. Actually, I'm just going to look this up. I'm going to Google myself now because I've forgotten some of the things. Here it is. Yeah, so the dopamine system, right? It gets quite complex, this kind of stuff. But CBD is a blocker of the CB1 receptor, which causes dopamine to increase, and so you have a synapse, and you have the synaptic cleft, and then you have the other synapse. So you have the presynaptic neuron, and you have the postsynaptic neuron. And THC works at the presynaptic neuron. So basically, it increases the amount of dopamine which goes into the synaptic cleft, and then ethyl acetate, which is in frankincense, inhibits acetylcholine or cholinesterase, which is the enzyme which absorbs or basically takes up that dopamine. So it's got like a double punch, increasing dopamine in your synaptic clefts. And dopamine's an interesting one. One of the things it's involved with is language production. So we mentioned it before. We get tongue-tied when we smoke cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
But in kind of hip hop culture, people will often smoke cannabis, and then they'll find that they get the opposite of tongue-tied because all of those options for words come out. So I find that really, really interesting because the name of the chamber where these two incenses were burned together is called, in Hebrew, it's called dabir, and that comes from the word dabar, and dabar means word. It's the same place we get abracadabra means I create as I speak, and the kadabar part of it is that same dabar. So this idea of talking to the angels and then taking out a revelation and putting it into words, and that's what happens. You see it in the Bible. You see Moses comes out of the chamber and then he produces a song or something like that, which gives the Israelites instructions on what they do. And generally the kind of things they're talking about are things like war divination is one, finding water, finding game are the main things. Also healing disease. So all of the things which traditional shamans do with their tribe, that's kind of what they do. They go off into their tent, in their hut on their own, like the high priest went on his own, and they take their mushrooms or they take their ayahuasca, and then they come back with some kind of words. And in fact, Ikaro, which is a series of syllables, basically, is also dabar. It would also be dabar in Hebrew. Dabar comes from this word, which means to line up. That's the original. To rank or to line up. That's where the word comes from, and it means sentence, it means word, it means speech, it means phrase, and it also means thing. This word. So that's one of the impacts is in the dopamine system. In the GABA system, it's really interesting because dehydroabiatic acid, which is also in frankincense, that is a modulator of GABA receptors. So it makes them more affected by GABA. GABA is an inhibitory. What do you call it? Neurotransmitter. So it's on 40% of your cells in your brain. So it's similar to Valium works on that system. So dehydroabiatic acid makes it more powerful, but THC works on the CB1 receptor, which reduces the amount of GABA produced. So that's kind of working in the opposite direction. Just coming back to your question about what Parker says here. So yeah, in terms of GABA, it does work in opposite directions. And the question is, it seems like many drugs can have opposite effects at times. In the dopamine system, it increases both the release of dopamine and also it stops or it slows down the uptake. And then you've got this other thing which is super interesting, which is the TRPV3 ion channels, right? This is another kind of signaling system in the brain, the ion channels, and they're involved in things like heat sensation and cold sensation and pain sensation, capsicum, like chili sensation, that kind of thing. The reason that hot chocolate tastes sweeter than cold hot chocolate if you leave it to get cold is because both sweetness and hot work on the same set of ion channels, the TRPV ion channels. So this is really interesting because TRPV3 seems to be involved in it is involved in migraines, but you've got different types of migraines. You've got migraine with aura and migraine without aura, and the aura is the psychological state or the mystical state even which precedes a migraine. So people will see flashing lights, people will hear voices, people will have terrors and ecstasies, people will smell smells, they'll sense presences. All of those kind of things are present in the aura of migraines. And migraines are you can tell from kind of gene, what do you call it, like non-normal genes, that the TRPV1 receptors are involved in migraines without aura, and the TRPV3s are involved in migraines with aura. And TRPV3 is affected by frankincense. And it's also affected by cannabis, which is why, if you give someone who's having an epileptic fit a joint, because it's also involved in, it's not just migraine aura, it's also epileptic auras. And epileptics will often have the same kind of set of things. They'll sense presences, they'll have déjà vu or jamais vu, all these kind of things.
What was what was the second thing you listed along with déjà vu?
Jamais vu. Jamais vu is when you've never seen, you don't recognize stuff that you should normally recognize. So you'll forget what your house like. It can be quite frightening.
I may have experienced it, but I didn't know the word.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm quite interested. I just want to kind of finish my rap here. I'm very curious about what it felt like because I've never experienced that.
Oh, I don't have any specific memory. I'm just thinking, that may have come to me. I may have experienced that, but I didn't have a word for it, so I don't have a personal biological or a personal biographical marker for it.
Okay.
Anyway, please continue.
And then, so one of the things which is connected with epilepsy sometimes is graphomania. which is compulsive writing of sometimes words and sometimes even poetry. There's a case of a woman who her epilepsy medicine was reduced, and she started writing compulsive poetry. And again, a lot of the stuff that comes out of these beers, that comes out of these inner chambers of it's Arad. Tel Arad is the name of the temple in southern Judea. A lot of this stuff comes out of it comes out in verse, and in fact, all of the, as far as I'm aware, all of the spiritual books, scripture, is written in verse. The Bible certainly is. So this is one that I wrote in an article called, let me find it actually, Emergence of Patriarchy. There you go, Drugs, the Israelites, and the Emergence of Patriarchy. Because it seems that frankincense was burned to Yahweh, and before it was burned to Yahweh, it was burned to Baal as well, who's a kind of local god, a Canaanite god. Also burned in Babylon, they had a Baal as well. And Asherah, who is described in some inscriptions around the Holy Land as the wife of Yahweh, she had frankincense burned to her. So if you have a look, I'll put the thing in the chat box. So that's an article, and if you have a look at the article, it's got an image of the chamber, and it's got two altars. It's not just one altar like you have in later periods in Israelite history. You've got two altars. You've got a large one and a small one, and you can see the residues on top of the altars. One of those is cannabis, one of those is frankincense, and that was discovered by basically running drug tests on this stuff. When we're talking about nearly 3,000 years later. And if you look there as well, you see a standing stone at the back of that of the chamber. But you also had another standing stone. You can kind of see on the right hand side where it would have been. And one of those standing stones was found with paint on it. And it looks like there were two gods being worshipped at the same time. It's the Israelite religion. And then later you get these reforms in the Israelitish religion, and you get people, and then Asherah, the wife of Yahweh, gets cast out of the religion, and the Tel Arad itself was kind of quite carefully dismantled. But some of the other, this is in the Book of Kings and the Book of Chronicles, describes how the high places were knocked down, and the temple prostitutes were all killed, and all the priests were killed, and the bones were piled up. And it seems like there was this centralizing movement in Israelitish religion where two things happened. One, the goddess was kicked out, and secondly, the local shrines lost their power. And that's an economic move as well, because the local shrine was where you used to go to have your grain blessed, or the firstborn of your if you produced an animal, then the firstborn of the animal had to go to the local shrine. And after this, and that sustained the priestly caste. And these were local priests, and they used to deal with your various problems. They dealt with medicine, they dealt with they gave you advice. But after this, everyone was ordered to take their economic produce basically up to Jerusalem, where it would be centralized and collected. So it's kind of a way of taxing centrally the economic produce of the Israelite nation. So check that one out. That's a Lucid News article which I put there, and I've actually got another one. What was the other one? That is in. I'm gonna have to try and remember where I published that one. Give me a second here. Oh yeah, Double Blind. Yeah, so psychedelic synergies in the Bible, how ancient shamans and priests combine plants to get high. I'll stick that one there in the chat box. And that's about the ayahuasca analog, well, not the ayahuasca analog, this enzyme inhibition in the anointing oil. The TRPV3 stuff is really fascinating, though. It's a kind of, we tend to think in terms of neurons, but there's this whole, the ion channels are completely different, and they're much, it's a system which is much more, how would you put it? Like the information spreads rather than kind of goes directly through different neurons. So it's another communication system within the brain, which isn't very well very well known. So frankincense, I mean, the immediate personal benefit that we can get from this is if you eat a bit of frankincense, or 2 bits of frankincense, about the size of 2 garden peas is about the right amount of frankincense to eat, and then you smoke a joint, you will really enjoy it because the two work really beautifully together.
Where does one get frankincense?
Where do you get frankincense?
Yeah.
You can steal it from church if you want to. You can any hippie shop, not any hippie shop, but a lot of hippie shops will sell it. You can get it online. Yeah, it's you can get oil, but you can just get the grains of frankincense, and they're really nice. It's lovely. And just by itself, it's a little bit of a tranquilizer, but I don't really like the term tranquilizer. Mm-hmm. It really opens up things. Very, very interesting. If you like, I use it in the bath, for example. If you burn a load of frankincense in the bathroom, it acts as a hot box, obviously, because there's not much space. I don't know what your bathroom's like, but not much space in the bathroom. And then the kind of, you don't really get a high in the same way. You get kind of a little bit relaxed, but the information that comes through is really interesting. You can see visions and see things, and we tend to expect to get high with drugs. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? But actually, in this context, in this culture, it's about passing over information, about divination, basically. The spirits talking to you, or the angels talking to you, whichever one in your particular system.
You see what I've got on the screen here? Well, it may not have appeared yet, but this is a very mainstream website, healthline.com. And there's this article, 5 benefits and uses of frankincense.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
So apparently the beneficial nature of it is not all that controversial. Reduces arthritis.
Indeed. I mean,
improves gut function, improves asthma, maintains oral health, and may fight certain cancers.
Yeah.
Although under myths, it says the stress reduction is a myth, and the antidepressant. This author claims that frankincense doesn't help with that.
I don't buy that at all. It's been tested on rats, among other things, and you see changes in their behaviour when they do that. And in fact, you can just take it yourself and see what happens. It's a gap. It works on the same system as Valium. You know, Valium is very obviously a stress reducer. Mm-hmm. It inhibits your brain. It makes it fire less. Cannabis less though. Cannabis is interesting because it doesn't work on the amygdala, and frankincense does work on the amygdala. As far as I remember, I think this is correct. The amygdala just doesn't have CB1 and CB2 receptors, which is why you can still get paranoid and stressed when you're on cannabis. But no, frankincense is great. Really, really nice. Just go a little bit easy on it. You've got to be careful not to have more than... Well, if you have too much, it'll start to offend your gut flora. So about the size of 2 garden peas is a good place to start. And if you want to go any higher than that, go slowly.
So have a look at what I've got up on screen here. This is from Wikipedia. And
okay, I was on the wrong page. Here we are. Apple cider vinegar.
Right. So lots of folks swear by apple cider vinegar and say it has all manner of beneficial effects. And in the above the table of contents, just synopsis on Wikipedia for apple cider vinegar, the Wikipedia authors are very keen to say apple cider vinegar has no medicinal or nutritional value. There is no high quality clinical evidence that regular consumption of apple cider vinegar helps to maintain or lose body weight, or is effective to manage blood glucose or lipid levels. So I don't know if you have any particular opinions about apple cider vinegar, but I know that a lot of people think that it is quite beneficial. And
I've got opinions about Wikipedia, man. They've got a whole
let fly
squadron of atheists jumping on absolutely everything paranormal, herbal, yeah. So I wouldn't take too seriously what it says in Wikipedia and look deeply. Personally, I mean, apple cider doesn't do anything for me. It gives me a rash, but I know lots of people swear by it.
All right. One thing I've learned, never drink it while fasting. Or if you do, dilute it dramatically. I took a swig of apple cider vinegar on a long fast once, and oh, it burned. It burned for a long time. That was not fun. Let's see. Parker says, when I hear ion channel, I think of a mechanism for moving things in and out of cells in the body. What should Parker think of when he hears the phrase ion channel?
Yeah, that, exactly. It's different trip V ion channels, and there's a whole bunch of them. They, like basically one of them will open, and it will trigger the ones next door to open. And so it propagates a wave of ion channels opening. And what that does is it allows certain ions, like potassium or sodium or something like that, to move either one way or the other. So it changes the potentials of neurons. So it makes them less likely to fire or more likely to fire.
Do you see what I have on screen now?
You've got a guy with a large chin,
yeah,
and about to say something. What's he going to say? Something about frankincense?
No, that's what I was going to ask you. What should I have him say here?
Is there some background to this story?
No, there's no story. This is just me playing around.
He should say Wikipedia is shit. I think you could do better than that.
Well, let's start with Wikipedia.
Read on Wikipedia.
I'm not sure I can get Wikipedia on this line. I'm going to have to do it smaller. Oh, shoot.
Is that a self-portrait?
It's kind of just a on the fly version of my logo here. Let's see. Where can I show it to you?
Oh, it's quite difficult to get all that in.
Who's that? Difficult to get a hold of whom?
Yeah, it's problematic when we kind of centralize knowledge like this, and it goes back to that centralizing of human beings have a centralizing drive. Whether it's centralizing resources or centralizing knowledge, and in the knowledge economy, it's the same thing really. I think that was the first phase of the internet, was where we all kind of thought we could get truth out of it, and now we're all pretty aware that we can get a million sides of every story out of it.
Yeah, I remember the heady days, like in the 90s, when people thought that the internet was going to be this great liberator, of information and leveler of hierarchies, and oh my goodness, how far from the truth.
Give it time. Yeah. I don't know, man. Give it time. We might find, as we were talking about earlier, the news channels are losing their. They're losing to Joe Rogan. He's a guy who lets people speak for 3 hours.
Yeah. So. They are, but if you go to YouTube and you look for the news, YouTube is definitely prioritizing mainstream voices now and shifting you away from alternative visions. But here, have a look at the screen. This is an animated version of my logo.
Okay.
So I was just doing a quick and ready version of that dude without looking at any reference.
Still waiting for it to appear on my screen here.
Oh, it'll be there. It's coming. Well, let's see, but this one.
Weird. Very cool. I like it.
There it is.
That's today's work, is it?
No. Today's work is this. That logo's from a couple of years ago. Here, let me show you a video. I'll show you the original drawing of this this logo. Where is it? Let's just go to YouTube. Like you, I depend on Google to find information about myself.
Terrible. That I think there probably must be a word for Googling yourself.
Well,
pathologically.
the motivation for Googling myself has changed over the years. It used to be, vanity oriented. Wanted to see what people were saying about me. But now it's just finding stuff that should be available to me on my own laptop. But, I've been through so many laptops and the information doesn't necessarily move from one hard drive to the next. So a lot of stuff that, I should have possession of, I just don't. But it's on the web somewhere and Google can find it for me.
Yeah. In one of the greatest books I've ever read, which is Eric Davis's Technosis, he talks about how each advance in science, there's no technology, amputates something. An example would be the car amputates your legs, so you don't walk so much. But I used to remember people's phone numbers.
Oh yeah,
I can remember my phone number now, but I've just outsourced that to my phone now.
Exactly.
But outsourcing stuff to the internet, that's another step, isn't it? Because that can just be turned off. My internet provider, actually, my internet didn't work today, and I was in trouble for a bit. Like, I had to talk to an extremely demeaning internet operative who made me feel very stupid about not knowing very much about my modem.
Uh-oh.
But yeah, no, we're in trouble. We're in trouble without being able, we can't find access to our distributed memories.
So now I can't figure out how to make my channel play my introductory video. Oh well. Never mind. It's not that important. I should have a copy of it stored locally here, but I probably don't.
Yeah, what if it all disappears one day?
What if? I mean, I've moved so many times and I've had to get rid of, large collections of books repeatedly. So if I had physical possession of all the books that I've ever owned, I would have a very impressive library, but I would not be very mobile. It's a pain in the ass to move boxes and boxes of books.
Yeah, but then there's the stuff you've written yourself, though. Like I've got a folder on my desktop. Like my desktop is an absolute mess at the moment. It's got, just a guess, probably about 60 different files on it, and one of them is called Under the Carpet, and that's where I just put one. Sometimes I just sweep everything into this Under the Carpet, and then in Under the Carpet there's another one that's also called Under the Carpet. I think that's
Under the Carpet squared.
Yeah, and I've got writing all over the place. I've got poems, I've got articles I've published. Like, I'm quite worried about it, really.
So yeah, I have a folder on my desktop called Delete Later.
Yeah.
And at present, I don't have... I used to have a folder on my desktop that was just called Desktop. It's like all the crap that was scattered over my desktop, I just make a folder called Desktop and I put it all in there. Thinking, I'll come back to it and sort it out later, and of course I never do. That stuff just stays...
I've got quite a lot of files that delete me in the name.
So what are we going to say about Wikipedia here? We better than Wikipedia is shit. Something more specific. What can we say?
Oh, you put me on the spot here.
Exactamundo.
Let's talk about knowledge, though.
Right.
Yeah. Leave me with that one for a bit.
Okay, I'll go to a different layer. Mess with stuff.
Question everything. Brackets on Wikipedia. Someone's got a catchphrase. Question everything. Who is it? Is it Gordon White? No, it's not. Is it? It's catchphrases. I like the way podcasters get their stock phrases.
What do you have in mind?
Oh right, okay. So that didn't make the grade, did it? Question everything on Wikipedia.
Well, it can.
I think we can do better than that. I'm getting obsessed with Wikipedia now.
Well, yeah, Wikipedia's got to be the first word.
Okay.
Well, actually, I can drag the word around. It can be later in the sentence if you want.
Wikipedia is also false news. Or check out my Trip V3 channels. Eat frankincense.
Something with Wikipedia. A pithy way of saying that Wikipedia is anything but objective and unbiased.
We're not going to fit that there, though.
No. That's why I say a pithy way of saying that.
Wikipedia is MK Ultra.
Okay. We'll do that. Wikipedia is MK Ultra. Can we get a sexier verb than is?
Surpasses.
There you go. That should be in a different color too. How about this one? All right. Oh, wrong layer. There. Oh, I haven't left myself enough room. All right. I'll figure it out.
The thing about, just coming back to what Parker's talking about Wikipedia here, I'm glad it's there as well. It's a very good place to start things, but it's not a good place to end things.
Exactly.
And it's got very specific areas where there's I don't know what kind of forces are at play there. I don't know if it's just kind of scientific conservatism or something more more sinister than that. I don't think so. I think it's just people being...
it's not Wikipedia that has that particular agenda. It's just Wikipedia is there for anybody to edit, and the people with the strongest motivation and the most time and the most the most collaborators, they win out. In these edit wars.
Yeah, so Wikipedia facts need citations. And there's the other thing about citations. Like, coronavirus is a very good example. We've been flinging data at each other for the last year, and it's not a whole lot clearer. I still don't know if masks are useful or not. And that's having looked at a whole load of data. You've got the Danish study that says no. You've got the study that say yes. Who knows? Just because there's citation. I've looked at one of my books looks at the history of science, and one of the chapters is about the history of homeopathy. And I'm not looking at the efficacy of homeopathy. I'm looking at how it's been studied, and the way it's been studied is absolutely shocking. It's the replications of experiments being not published. There's a guy called Ben Veniste who did a whole series of experiments. In fact, he was a skeptical French. He was the head of INSERM, which is kind of the French medical. One of the big French medical organisations, and he was the head of the immunology department. And he developed one of the immunological assays. Basically, he was the guy who developed a test that said whether a drug is effective or not. And the Homeopathic Association went to him and said, "Can you test these ultra high dilutions?" And he said, "No. That's ridiculous. They violate Avogadro's constant. Get out of here." And they said, "Look, we're not interested in your theories. We want you to test these dilutions." So they paid him, and he did. And he did a bunch of tests and came out with some really interesting data, which was, according to his original research, they get, as you'd expect, as a drug gets more and more diluted, it gets less powerful. But then you get to a certain point where it starts getting more powerful again, and then it gets less powerful, and it forms a periodic wave as you continue to dilute it. And he was like, "What the hell is this?" And he closed his lab for 2.5 years, did 500 experiments, mostly with basophils, like basically how the health of basophils. But he ended up looking at kind of still beating guinea pig hearts and stuff as he ran homeopathic dilutions through them. But anyway, when he tried to publish in Nature, and they said, "This flies in the face of all accepted science. You need to get replications." And you don't get replications before you publish. That's why it's called peer review, not peer. Review means looking again, right? So anyway, he bites his tongue and gets 4 replications from different labs, double-blind tests around the world, and they all supported his theory. So they published. And then what happened was it was published with an incredulous editorial, and then over the next bunch of years, there was, I think there were 21, this guy, Michel Schiff, who's a French philosopher of science, he phoned around a bunch of labs and asked if they'd done any replications. He found 21 positive replications, none of which were printed. They only printed 1 negative replication, i.e. 1 failed replication, a couple of years later. And then other things happened, like this guy, he tried to organise a visit from Italian physicists who are studying coherent domain theory, which is how water arranges itself into different domains in a way that water can remember stuff. And their visit gets blocked, and he gets bullied. He gets his funding cut. There's another guy, Yves Rocard, who's the father of the French, I think, atom bomb or hydrogen bomb, one of the two, and the father of the prime minister as well, a French president, sorry. And he lost his funding because he started doing work with water diviners, again, looking at coherent domain theory. The publishing, I think it's fascinating how the institutions of science manage truth like that. And actually, I think it reminds me of the days of the Gnostics, because a lot of the same touch points come up. For example, invisible cures was one of the things that Irenaeus complains about in Against Heresies. Irenaeus was a guy who denounced all these Gnostic heresies back, I think it was the 3rd century, if I remember correctly. Invisible cures was one. The authority of people in charge was another one. People who weren't meant to be doing cures, or people who weren't meant to be, like in the case of the Gnostics, it was 1 second, sweetheart. In the case of the Gnostics, it was I lost train of thought. My daughter's about to show me something. Oh, go on, show me. That is very cool. Okay, she's doing some tie dyeing for Christmas presents.
Nice.
So authorities, who was allowed to prophesy? Was it the bishop, or the existence of the Holy Spirit, which was again invisible, action at a distance? All of these things, which the people who were complaining about the Gnostics, exactly the same touch points are coming up with scientific publications. I'm going to agree with Parker here. Parker says masks are useful, just like when you should cover your mouth when you sneeze. Kind of. Using masks to stop a virus is like using chicken wire to stop a shotgun. Right? It might stop something, but when you're talking about millions of particles, who knows? I think they might do something.
Parker, you're missing an L in MK Ultra. Oh, did I leave out an L? I bet I did. I can see it when it's in print, but not in my drawing. Let's see. Yep. No, I've got an L. I've got it there.
They say if you don't have data in 3 locations, you don't really have it. That's very interesting. The idea that you should, replicate. Science is, something has to be replicated for it to be approved. But then, not only does it have to be replicated, it then has to be published. And if you've got people who, like in Nature, for example, or the Lancet, they're funded by pharmaceuticals companies. Are they gonna publish stuff which says this invisible drug? And this guy, Benveniste, was taking the signature of his experiments. Got really weird. They were doing things. They were working with what's called a Langendorf apparatus, which is a still beating heart of a guinea pig, and you put a drug through it and you measure how much of the water it pumps through. And what he was doing was he found that what you could do is you could run a drug through it and it would have an effect. You could run a high dilution through it, and a high dilution means basically there's no molecules left of the drug by the time it's diluted by that much. Right. But he also ran an electric current between a vat of water which had a drug in it and a vat of water which didn't have a drug in it, and he found that the efficacy of the vat of water which never had a drug in it was the same. And in fact, he was emailing this stuff to other labs, and they would play it into their water, or they would run a current through the water, and it had similar effects. I'm not saying that homeopathy works. I'm saying that the way it's been investigated is absolutely shocking. That's in my first book, Science Revealed.
When I was in community college, before I went to university, I took my first philosophy courses there, and the philosophy teacher was somebody who was very involved with the the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. So right. He brought Paul Kurtz, who is possibly the founder of that organization, to speak, and this other Indian anti-God man. Like he would go around to the Indian God men and demonstrate how their miracles are sleights of hand and magician's tricks. So he was very motivated, And when he did bring Paul Kurtz to to the community college where I was a student. He brought James Randi as well. I've had lunch with James Randi.
Really?
Yeah, I guess he's now the late James Randi. But, somebody asked Paul Kurtz about Whitley Strieber's experiences. Whitley Strieber, author of Communion. And this shocked me at the time, and it shocks me to this day. To dismiss everything that Whitley Strieber has to say, Paul Kurtz just said, well, Whitley Strieber claims to have been anally raped by the aliens. That's the first and only thing he said about it. Basically, here, let me pull this one seemingly shocking, seemingly sort of frivolous, or, because it's sexual, it's not anything we can discuss. Let me just pull this one detail out and present it as a representative of the whole. And that is so obviously not good hygiene when it comes to, epistemology or argumentation.
Yeah.
It's malpractice. That is sophistry. And I was so shocked to hear him do that. And then, that's nothing. Like if you seriously read what people whose job it is to debunk UFO reports, the explanations they come up with for people's accounts are just, the stereotypical or archetypal example of that is, swamp gas. Somebody has this very detailed description of this craft they've seen, and the debunker, without looking at any evidence, says, well, there is a swamp nearby, and sometimes swamp gas is luminescent under certain conditions, so you probably saw swamp gas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny you bring up Randi. It's probably not good to speak ill of the dead, but Randi didn't believe in anything, so, screw him. This is a line from Randi. I don't know whether the lies are conscious liars all the time. That was when he was picked up for his lying. Mm-hmm. He was one of the four, the hit squad that went into Benveniste's experiments, right? One of them was Randi, and and he was performing magic tricks when people were trying to count, were trying to count the basophils. And he was this hit squad insisted on doing the pipetting themselves. The only scientist amongst the four of them was a guy called, what's his name, Walter Stewart, right? The same year, he investigated a pathologist called Dr. Imanishi Kari, found him guilty of 19 counts of scientific fraud. This woman her career was destroyed, and she was completely exonerated 8 years later. Oh. Outrageous behaviour. So Nature publishes 3 negative results and judges Benveniste to be fraudulent, and he replied that Benveniste replies that 3 positive results weren't reported. One negative was in fact a neutral. 2 others were due to poor pipetting. Right, and his response wasn't printed. And on that matter of not printing, right. So, for example, he published one paper on this same topic, co-signed by a professor of statistics, and someone writes in with a complaint, says these figures are far too good. We can't believe these. Benveniste writes back and says, mate, you forgot to square one of the values because you've done his sums wrong, and Benveniste's response wasn't printed in Nature. Right, so that's the level of censorship basically that's going on with that particular investigation. I want to repeat, I'm not saying that homeopathy is true or not. I wouldn't be so foolish to say something like that in public. But the investigation to it, which you can read in either my book, Science Revealed, or in Michelle Schiff's book, The Memory of Water, is shocking. It's absolutely shocking. So Benveniste, he lost his grant. He ended up dying. I think he died of a heart attack in the end. He wasn't happy.
Would you type his name in the chat, and I will put that in the chat for the live stream?
Yeah, I want to kind of. His name's Benveniste. His first name is Jacques. I would caution people because what you'll do is you'll go on Wikipedia and you'll find some crap about Benveniste being fraudulent and being found to be fraudulent. So go beyond that. Look into it a little bit deeper, preferably in my book, obviously, and have a look at it. I'll tell you what, I'll send you the chapter so you can have a look at it yourself.
Okay, great. As a PDF?
I'll send you as PDF, yeah. Okay. Jacques Benveniste, so that's Dr. Yeah, so he will. I haven't looked, but I'm sure he gets slandered in Wikipedia.
I would be shocked if he didn't. Let's see.
Yeah.
First name Jacques, you said?
Yeah, Jacques. I put it in the chat as well.
Okay, there he is. Yeah.
It's Jack spelt in a complicated French way.
Yeah. I was not looking forward to trying to suss that out on my own. Let's see. Benveniste Affair.
Yeah, the Benveniste Affair, of course.
Wow. All right. Oh, and look at this. His name is not a hyperlink. He doesn't have his own page. His only representation is, in this controversy.
That's interesting as well, isn't it?
Whereas I'm sure James Randi, look at this. James Randi's name is a link. He's got his own page.
I was going to ask, actually.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, what does James Randi get on Wikipedia?
Oh, I'm sure he's got a very robust page. Look at this. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He's very well represented. Huh. Although often referred to as a debunker, Randi said he disliked the term's connotations and preferred to describe himself as an investigator. He wrote about paranormal phenomena, skepticism, and the history of magic. He was a frequent guest on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, famously exposing fraudulent faith healer Peter Popoff, and was occasionally featured on the television program Penn and Teller Bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah. This, yeah, the guy had a big chip on his shoulder. There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
You're breaking up there. And you know what?
It's not hard to find psychics and then ridicule them in public.
Right.
In fact, that it's not hard to find psychics and ridicule them in public. Stephen Fry's got a rap doing the same thing. He really likes that kind of thing. He's kind of super atheist. Very, very driven atheist.
I think it was Robert Anton Wilson.
I think that's coming to an end, though. It's very interesting watching young people who didn't grow up with the institutions. Like I was saying before,
Hey, Danny, your audio quality has deteriorated dramatically here, and that may be just for the best because it is 5 o'clock. It is time for me to bring the stream to an end.
You started breaking up now.